The 16th Legion emerged from the gene forges of Terra during the earliest phases of the Great Crusade, their genetic template drawn from the carefully cultivated essence of the Primarch, who would later be known as Horus Lupercal. Unlike many of their brother legions, who struggled with initial stability issues or recruitment challenges, the 16th displayed an immediate aptitude for warfare that caught the attention of the Emperor himself. Their gene seed proved remarkably stable, producing Astartes who exhibited not only exceptional physical prowess, but also an innate understanding of combined arms tactics and rapid assault doctrines. Initially designated as the Luna Wolves, the Legion took their name from Terra's ancient moon, where their first fortress monastery was established in the sprawling industrial complexes that honeycombed Luna's surface. The symbolism was deliberate. Just as Luna orbited Terra in eternal vigilance, so too would the 16th Legion serve as the Emperor's most trusted instrument of conquest. Their early heraldry reflected this connection, featuring the pale wolf's head that would become synonymous with their reputation across the galaxy. The Legion's first campaigns were conducted under the direct oversight of the Emperor, who personally led many of their initial engagements as the Great Crusade expanded beyond the Sol system. These early battles served as a crucible for the Luna Wolves, forging their tactical doctrines and establishing the aggressive, fast-moving warfare style that would later define their approach to conquest. The Emperor recognized something exceptional in the 16th Legion's performance: their ability to adapt quickly to new threats, their natural cohesion as a fighting force, and their instinctive grasp of when to press an advantage or withdraw to regroup. During these formative years, the Luna Wolves developed their signature tactical approach of rapid deployment followed by overwhelming assault. They excelled at identifying enemy weak points and exploiting them with surgical precision, often achieving victory through bold maneuvers that other legions might have considered reckless. This tactical flexibility would prove invaluable when their Primarch was eventually discovered, as it aligned perfectly with his own strategic instincts. The discovery of Horus on the mining world of Thonia marked a turning point not just for the 16th Legion, but for the entire Great Crusade. Thonia was a world that had been strip-mined for millennia, its surface scarred by vast excavations and dominated by towering hive cities built from the detritus of industrial exploitation. The planet's society had evolved into a complex hierarchy of gang warfare, where survival depended on cunning, brutality, and the ability to forge and break alliances as circumstances demanded. Horus had risen to prominence on this harsh world through a combination of natural charisma and tactical brilliance that set him apart from Thonia's other gang leaders. By the time the Emperor arrived, Horus controlled significant portions of the planet's underworld, commanding the loyalty of thousands of fighters who had learned to trust his judgment implicitly. The Emperor's recognition of Horus was immediate and profound. Here was a son who had not merely survived his harsh upbringing, but had thrived, developing leadership skills that would prove essential to the Great Crusade's expansion. The reunion between the Emperor and Horus was unlike many of the other Primarch discoveries. Where some Primarchs required time to adjust to their new role or struggled with the transition from their adopted worlds, Horus embraced his destiny with an enthusiasm that impressed even the Emperor. Within months of joining the Great Crusade, Horus had integrated himself completely into the 16th Legion's command structure, studying their tactics, learning their history, and beginning to shape them into an even more formidable fighting force. Under Horus's leadership, the Luna Wolves underwent a transformation that went beyond mere tactical improvements. The Primarch's presence seemed to unlock potential within the Legion that had previously remained dormant. Recruitment from Thonia brought new blood into the ranks, warriors who had been forged in the same crucible of gang warfare that had shaped their Primarch. These Thonian recruits brought with them a different perspective on warfare, one that emphasized adaptability, opportunism, and the importance of personal bonds between warriors. The integration of Thonian culture into the Luna Wolves created a unique dynamic within the Legion. The gang warfare traditions of Thonia, with their emphasis on personal loyalty and flexible hierarchies, blended with the disciplined military structure inherited from Terra. This fusion produced a Legion that was simultaneously highly disciplined and remarkably adaptable, capable of maintaining cohesion even when operating in small, independent units across vast distances. Horus's rapid rise within the imperial hierarchy was unprecedented. The emperor, who had shown favor to all his sons but had rarely elevated any single primarch above his brothers, began to rely increasingly on Horus's counsel and leadership. The 16th Legion found themselves at the forefront of the most challenging campaigns, tasked with breaking enemy strongholds that had resisted other imperial forces. Their success rate was extraordinary, with Horus demonstrating an ability to read both tactical situations and enemy psychology that consistently delivered victories with minimal casualties. The transformation from Luna Wolves to Sons of Horus came as recognition of the profound changes that had occurred within the Legion. The Emperor himself authorized the change in designation, acknowledging that the 16th Legion had evolved beyond their original identity. The new name reflected not just their loyalty to their primarch, but also their role as the exemplars of what the Great Crusade could achieve when perfectly executed. The Legion's heraldry evolved as well, incorporating elements that reflected both their Terran origins and their Chthonian heritage. As the Sons of Horus, the Legion became the acknowledged spearpoint of the Great Crusade. They were consistently assigned to the most critical theaters of war, often serving as the vanguard for major offensive operations, or as the force called upon to break deadlocks that had stalled other imperial advances. Their reputation grew with each victory, and other legions began to study their tactics, trying to understand what made the Sons of Horus so consistently successful. The Ulanor campaign represented the pinnacle of the Sons of Horus's early achievements. The Orc Empire that had established itself in the Ulanor system posed one of the greatest threats the Great Crusade had yet encountered. The Greenskins had created a vast military machine that spanned multiple star systems, with Ulanor Prime serving as the heart of an empire that threatened to expand indefinitely if left unchecked. The scale of the Orc presence was staggering. Billions of Greenskins organized under the leadership of an Orc warlord, whose tactical acumen surpassed anything previously encountered among the species. The Imperial response to the Ulanor threat involved multiple Space Marine legions, but it was the Sons of Horus who spearheaded the assault on the primary Orc strongholds. Horus's tactical planning for the campaign demonstrated his growing mastery of large-scale warfare, coordinating the actions of multiple legions while ensuring that each force was deployed to maximum effect. The Sons of Horus themselves were tasked with the most dangerous assignments: deep strikes into heavily fortified positions, rapid advances to secure key objectives before the Orcs could respond, and the elimination of enemy commanders whose deaths would disrupt the Greenskin chain of command. The battle for Ulanor Prime itself showcased the Sons of Horus at their finest. While other legions engaged in grinding attritional warfare against the Orc masses, the Sons of Horus conducted a series of surgical strikes that systematically dismantled the enemy's command structure. Their ability to coordinate rapid movements across the battlefield, combined with their talent for identifying and exploiting enemy weaknesses, allowed them to achieve objectives that might have required far larger forces using conventional tactics. Horus's personal combat against the Orc warlord became legendary throughout the Imperial forces. The duel was not merely a contest of individual skill, but a demonstration of the tactical principles that guided the Sons of Horus. Rather than engaging in a straightforward battle of strength, Horus maneuvered his opponent into a position where the Orcs' advantages were neutralized, then struck with devastating efficiency. The warlord's death sent shockwaves through the Orc forces, triggering the collapse of their organized resistance across the entire system. The victory at Ulanor had consequences that extended far beyond the immediate military success. The Emperor's decision to name Horus as Warmaster, granting him supreme command over all Imperial military forces, was a direct result of the tactical brilliance displayed during the campaign. This appointment elevated not just Horus himself, but the entire Sons of Horus Legion to a position of unprecedented authority within the Great Crusades hierarchy. The Legion's campaigns across the galaxy following Ulanor demonstrated their ability to adapt their proven tactics to an enormous variety of combat environments. On the Forge world of Mazoa, They coordinated with Mechanicum forces to break through defensive positions that had been designed specifically to counter Space Marine assault tactics. The Sons of Horus approached the problem by studying the defenders' preparations and identifying assumptions about how Space Marines would attack, then deliberately adopting unconventional approaches that caught the enemy off guard. In the Cave's Belt, the Legion conducted a series of void warfare operations that showcased their ability to coordinate ship-to-ship combat with boarding actions and planetary assaults. The asteroid mining facilities that dominated the belt had been converted into fortress positions by renegade human forces, creating a three-dimensional battlefield that challenged conventional tactical doctrines. The Sons of Horus adapted by developing new techniques for zero-gravity combat and learning to use the belt's complex gravitational interactions to their advantage during ship movements. The compliance of the Davin system demonstrated another aspect of the Sons of Horus's capabilities, their ability to achieve victory through negotiation and diplomacy when circumstances made such approaches preferable to direct military action. Horus personally conducted negotiations with the system's rulers, using a combination of implied threat and genuine diplomatic skill to secure compliance without the massive casualties that a direct assault would have required. This success reinforced the growing perception that the Sons of Horus were not merely exceptional warriors, but complete instruments of imperial policy. Throughout these campaigns, the Legion continued to evolve and refine their tactical doctrines. The integration of new technologies, the lessons learned from each engagement, and the continuous influx of recruits from both Terra and Thonia created a force that was constantly improving its capabilities. The Sons of Horus developed specialized formations for different types of warfare, from the Reaver squads that excelled at rapid assault operations to the Justaran Terminator companies that could break through the most heavily fortified positions. The Legion's reputation for success created a self-reinforcing cycle of excellence. The best recruits sought to join the Sons of Horus, attracted by their record of victory and the opportunity to serve under Horus's direct command. The Legion's equipment was consistently upgraded with the finest weapons and armor available, as the Mechanicum and other Imperial organizations competed to supply the Warmaster's forces. This combination of superior personnel, equipment, and leadership created a military instrument that seemed capable of overcoming any obstacle the galaxy could present. The seeds of corruption that would ultimately transform the Sons of Horus into the Black Legion were planted not through grand declarations of rebellion, but through subtle manipulations that exploited the very bonds of brotherhood that had made the Legion so formidable. The warrior lodges that had emerged within several Space Marine legions during the Great Crusade represented an evolution of the gang brotherhood traditions that many Astartes had brought from their recruitment worlds. These informal organizations existed parallel to the official command structure, creating networks of personal loyalty that transcended company and chapter boundaries. Within the Sons of Horus, the lodge system had developed particular strength due to the Thonian recruits' familiarity with such organizations. The lodges provided a forum where battle brothers could speak freely about matters that formal military hierarchy might discourage, concerns about campaign objectives, doubts about specific orders, or personal grievances that might otherwise fester. The lodge meetings were conducted in secret, often in repurposed chambers deep within the Legion's ships, where warriors would gather without their armor to discuss matters as equals rather than according to rank. Erebus of the Word Bearers had recognized the potential of these organizations long before most others understood their significance. The first chaplain possessed an intuitive grasp of how informal power structures could be leveraged to influence formal command decisions. His integration into the lodge system was masterful in its subtlety. Rather than attempting to dominate these gatherings, he positioned himself as a thoughtful contributor who raised questions that others might not have considered. His theological training allowed him to frame discussions in ways that gradually introduced concepts that would have been rejected if presented directly. The corruption of the warrior lodges began with seemingly innocent philosophical discussions about the nature of the Great Crusade itself. Erebus would raise questions about the Emperor's ultimate intentions, wondering aloud whether the master of mankind truly understood the challenges faced by those who fought in his name. These conversations were carefully crafted to exploit existing frustrations within the Legion, the exhaustion that came from centuries of constant warfare, the growing distance between the Emperor and his armies as he withdrew to Terra, and the increasing bureaucratization of the Imperial war machine. Horus himself was not initially a member of the warrior lodges, but their influence reached him through the reports and recommendations of officers who participated in these gatherings. The Warmaster had always prided himself on maintaining close relationships with his subordinates, and the lodge system provided an additional channel through which concerns and suggestions could reach his attention. What he did not realize was that this information was being filtered through Erebus's influence, subtly shaping his understanding of his legion's morale and priorities. The pivotal moment came during the compliance of the Davin system, a campaign that should have been a routine operation for the Sons of Horus. The world of Davin had been brought into imperial compliance decades earlier through Horus's diplomatic efforts, but reports had reached the Warmaster indicating that the planet had fallen under the influence of a secessionist movement. The decision to return to Davin was presented as a matter of personal honor. Horus had given his word that the world would remain loyal to the Imperium, and its apparent betrayal represented a challenge to his reputation as well as imperial authority. The intelligence that prompted the Davin expedition had been carefully crafted by those who sought to manipulate the Warmaster. The supposed rebellion was real enough, but its nature and extent had been deliberately misrepresented. Rather than a simple political uprising, the situation on Davin involved forces that drew their power from sources that imperial doctrine refused to acknowledge. The warrior priests who led the rebellion had made compacts with entities that existed beyond the material realm, gaining access to weapons and tactics that conventional imperial forces were ill-equipped to counter. The Sons of Horus approached the Davin campaign with their characteristic confidence, expecting to resolve the situation through a combination of rapid deployment and overwhelming force. The initial landings proceeded according to plan, with the Legion's advance companies establishing secure beachheads and beginning their advance toward the primary rebel strongholds. However, the enemy's response differed fundamentally from anything the Sons of Horus had previously encountered. The rebels fought with a ferocity that seemed to transcend normal human limitations, displaying tactical coordination that suggested supernatural guidance. The weapon that struck down Horus during the fighting on Davin was unlike anything in the Imperial arsenal. The anatheme blade that inflicted the wound had been forged through processes that combined advanced metallurgy with rituals that drew power from the Imperium itself. The blade's edge existed partially outside normal space-time, allowing it to penetrate even the sophisticated protection systems of the Warmaster's armor. The wound it inflicted was not merely physical. The weapon carried a spiritual poison that began corrupting Horus's very essence from the moment it pierced his flesh. The crisis that followed Horus's wounding revealed the extent to which the warrior lodge system had been compromised. As the Warmaster lay dying despite the best efforts of the Legion's apothecaries, it was lodge members who suggested seeking alternative forms of healing. The traditional medical approaches of the Imperium were proving inadequate, and conventional imperial doctrine offered no solutions for wounds that affected both body and soul. The Lodge brothers argued that desperate circumstances required desperate measures, and that the Warmaster's life was worth any risk. The decision to transport Horus to the Serpent Lodge Temple on Davin's moon represented a complete departure from imperial protocol. The structure itself was an ancient edifice that predated human settlement of the system, its architecture suggesting influences that had no place in imperial understanding of history. The interior spaces were designed according to geometric principles that seemed to twist perception itself, creating chambers where the normal laws of physics appeared to operate differently. The Serpent Lodge priests who maintained the temple claimed knowledge of healing techniques that could address wounds affecting both material and immaterial aspects of existence. The ritual conducted within the temple was presented to the Sons of Horus officers as an advanced form of medical treatment, utilizing techniques that Imperial science had not yet developed. In reality, the ceremony was designed to sever Horus's connection to the Emperor's psychic influence while simultaneously opening his consciousness to the whispers of the Chaos Gods. The process was agonizing for the Warmaster, as his enhanced physiology fought against the spiritual corruption being introduced into his system. The visions that assaulted his mind during the ritual showed him potential futures, where the Emperor's ultimate plans would lead to the extinction of the Space Marine legions and the establishment of a sterile galactic empire where warriors like Horus would have no place. The transformation that occurred within the Serpent Lodge temple was not immediately apparent to those who witnessed Horus's apparent recovery. The Warmaster emerged from the ritual chamber, seemingly restored to full health, displaying the same charisma and tactical brilliance that had made him the Emperor's chosen heir. However, subtle changes in his behavior and decision-making processes began to manifest in the days following his recovery. His strategic thinking became more ruthless, his willingness to accept casualties increased, and his attitude toward Imperial doctrine shifted from respectful compliance to barely concealed skepticism. The corruption that had taken root in Horus began to spread throughout the Sons of Horus through the same lodge networks that had facilitated his initial downfall. The Warmaster's changed perspective on the Great Crusade provided validation for doubts that had been carefully cultivated within the warrior lodges over months and years. Officers who had previously suppressed concerns about Imperial policy found themselves encouraged to voice these opinions openly, creating an atmosphere where criticism of the Emperor's decisions became not only acceptable, but expected. The planning for what would become known as the Istvan III atrocity began during this period of growing disillusionment within the Sons of Horus. Horus had concluded that the Imperium's future required fundamental changes that could only be achieved through the elimination of those elements within the Space Marine legions that remained unquestioningly loyal to the Emperor. The operation was conceived as a surgical strike that would remove potential opposition while simultaneously demonstrating the superiority of the new order that Horus envisioned. The selection of Istvan III as the target for this purge was carefully calculated. The world had recently fallen under the control of a secessionist government that provided a legitimate justification for military intervention. The planet's urban centers were heavily fortified, requiring the kind of intensive ground combat that would allow Horus to deploy specific units in positions where they could be eliminated without arousing suspicion among the broader legion. The campaign would appear to be a standard compliance operation, while actually serving as an execution ground for those elements within the Sons of Horus that Horus could not trust to follow him into rebellion. The loyalist elements within the Sons of Horus were identified through careful analysis of warrior lodge participation and individual responses to the subtle ideological shifts that had been occurring within the Legion. Those officers and battle brothers who had consistently supported traditional Imperial doctrine, who had expressed reservations about the lodge system, or who had demonstrated particular devotion to the Emperor were marked for elimination. The process was conducted with the same attention to detail that the Sons of Horus had always applied to military operations, ensuring that the purge would be thorough and decisive. The deployment to Istvan III followed established Sons of Horus tactical doctrine, with the Legion's forces divided among multiple landing sites to maximize their ability to respond to enemy movements. However, the unit assignments had been carefully manipulated to ensure that loyalist elements were concentrated in positions where they would face the heaviest resistance. The battle plan called for these units to spearhead assaults against the most heavily fortified enemy positions, ostensibly to take advantage of their proven combat effectiveness, but actually to ensure their destruction. The virus bombing of Istvan III represented a complete departure from the Sons of Horus's previous operational methods. The Life Eater virus deployed against the planet's surface was designed to eliminate all organic life within hours of release, creating a sterile wasteland where nothing could survive. The weapon had been developed by the Death Guard's chemical warfare specialists, but its use against Imperial forces marked the first open act of rebellion against the Emperor's authority. The bombing was timed to occur after the Loyalist elements had been committed to ground operations, ensuring that they would be trapped on the planet's surface when the virus was released. The survivors of the initial virus attack found themselves facing a nightmare that their training had never prepared them to handle. The Life-Eater virus consumed organic matter with terrifying efficiency, reducing human bodies to component chemicals within minutes of exposure. Those Space Marines who managed to find sealed environments or who possessed equipment capable of filtering the contaminated atmosphere faced the additional horror of watching their battle brothers die in agony as the virus consumed them from within. The psychological impact of the attack was as devastating as its physical effects, as the survivors realized that they had been deliberately betrayed by their own Primarch and Legion command. The firestorm that followed the virus bombing was intended to eliminate any remaining traces of life on Istvan III's surface. The atmospheric ignition created temperatures that exceeded those found in most industrial furnaces, turning the planet's cities into vast crematoriums where even Space Marine armor offered little protection. The few survivors who managed to endure both the virus attack and the subsequent firestorm found themselves stranded on a world that had been transformed into a hellscape of ash and twisted metal, with no hope of evacuation or rescue. The betrayal at Istvan III marked the transformation of the Sons of Horus from loyal servants of the Emperor into the primary architects of galactic civil war. With the elimination of loyalist elements within their ranks, the Legion emerged as a unified force dedicated to overthrowing the Imperial order they had once championed. Horus's position as Warmaster, originally granted in recognition of his tactical brilliance and unwavering loyalty, now provided him with the authority and resources necessary to coordinate the largest military rebellion in human history. The Sons of Horus assumed the role of supreme command for the traitor legions through a combination of existing institutional authority and demonstrated tactical superiority. Horus's appointment as Warmaster had established precedent for his legion to issue orders to other Space Marine forces, and this command structure proved invaluable when coordinating the complex logistics of rebellion. The Legion's extensive network of fleet assets, supply bases, and communication relays provided the infrastructure necessary to maintain contact between widely dispersed traitor forces across multiple star systems. The transformation of the Sons of Horus into masters of heretical warfare required fundamental changes to their organizational structure and tactical doctrine. The Legion's command hierarchy was restructured to accommodate the integration of demonic allies and corrupted Imperial assets, creating new positions that had no equivalent in loyal Space Marine forces. The traditional company structure was modified to include specialists in psychic warfare, demon summoning, and the coordination of mortal auxiliary forces drawn from planets that had declared for the Warmaster. Ezekiel Abaddon emerged as the most prominent of Horus's lieutenants during this period, his role evolving from first captain to the Warmaster's primary instrument of military policy. Abaddon's tactical acumen had been evident throughout the Great Crusade, but the heresy provided opportunities for him to demonstrate strategic thinking on a scale that matched his Primarch's ambitions. His command of the First Company Justaran Terminators gave him access to the Legion's most elite warriors, and his personal relationship with Horus ensured that his recommendations carried significant weight in strategic planning sessions. The corruption that had claimed Abaddon was more gradual than his Primarch's dramatic transformation, manifesting as an increasing willingness to employ methods that Imperial doctrine would have forbidden. His tactical calculations began to factor in acceptable casualty rates that would have been unthinkable during the Great Crusade, and his strategic planning incorporated assets and allies that existed outside the conventional Imperial military structure. The Justaran under his command became specialists in the kind of brutal, close-quarters warfare that characterized many Heresy-era engagements, their Terminator armor modified with trophies and decorations that reflected their growing distance from Imperial traditions. Horus Aximand, known throughout the Legion as Little Horus due to his facial resemblance to the Warmaster, represented a different aspect of the Sons of Horus's transformation. His role as captain of the 5th Company placed him in command of some of the Legion's most versatile units, forces that could adapt quickly to changing battlefield conditions. Aximan's corruption manifested as an obsession with proving himself worthy of his nickname, driving him to increasingly desperate acts of violence and tactical risk-taking. His company became known for accepting missions that other units considered suicidal, achieving objectives through sheer determination and willingness to accept catastrophic losses. The survival and eventual corruption of Garville Loken provided one of the most tragic examples of how the heresy transformed even the most principled warriors. Loken had been among the most vocal opponents of the warrior lodge system within the Sons of Horus, and his survival of the Istvan III massacre was due largely to his tactical skill and unwillingness to accept defeat even in hopeless circumstances. The months he spent fighting a guerrilla campaign on the virus-bombed surface of Istvan III exposed him to horrors that gradually eroded his faith in Imperial ideals and his belief in the possibility of redemption for his fallen legion. When Loken was eventually recovered from Istvan III, his rescue came not from loyal Imperial forces, but from agents of the Sons of Horus who had been tasked with eliminating any remaining survivors. The psychological warfare techniques employed during his capture and subsequent indoctrination were designed to break down his resistance through a combination of physical torture and exposure to evidence of the Emperor's perceived failures. The process was overseen by specialists who understood that Loken's eventual conversion would serve as a powerful symbol of the futility of continued resistance to the Warmaster's vision. The death of Tarek Torgadin during the fighting on Istvan III represented a personal loss for Horus that influenced his subsequent strategic decisions. Torgadin had served as the Legion's morale officer and had maintained personal relationships with warriors throughout the Sons of Horus hierarchy. His elimination during the Loyalist Purge was considered necessary by the traitor command structure, but his death created a gap in the Legion's informal leadership network that was never adequately filled. The absence of Torgadin's moderating influence contributed to the increasingly extreme measures that the Sons of Horus employed as the heresy progressed. The Sons of Horus developed new tactical doctrines specifically designed for the challenges of fighting other Space Marine legions. Traditional Astartes warfare had been optimized for conflicts against inferior opponents, relying on superior equipment, training, and coordination to achieve victory against numerically superior enemies. Fighting other Space Marines required different approaches, emphasizing the exploitation of doctrinal differences and the integration of assets that loyal legions could not or would not employ. The Legion's preferred weapons evolved to reflect their new role as leaders of a heretical war machine. Plasma weapons became increasingly common within Sons of Horus units, their devastating firepower proving effective against the enhanced armor systems employed by Loyalist Space Marines. The Legion's artificers developed specialized ammunition types designed to penetrate Astartes' power armor, including bolt rounds that incorporated fragments of warp-touched materials that could disrupt the protective systems of enemy equipment. The integration of demonic allies into Sons of Horus tactical formations represented a fundamental departure from Imperial military doctrine. The process began with the summoning of lesser warp entities to serve as scouts and infiltrators, their immaterial nature allowing them to gather intelligence that conventional reconnaissance methods could not obtain. As the Legion's corruption deepened, more powerful demons were bound into service, their supernatural abilities providing advantages that no purely material force could match. The demon binding rituals employed by the Sons of Horus required the services of specialists who combined military training with knowledge of warp manipulation techniques. These warrior sorcerers emerged from the ranks of librarians who had embraced the forbidden knowledge that traditional Imperial doctrine sought to suppress. Their abilities allowed them to negotiate with demonic entities, establishing the terms of service that would bind these creatures to the Legion's cause, while minimizing the risk of uncontrolled possession or corruption among the rank and file battle brothers. The coordination of traitor forces across multiple theaters of war required the Sons of Horus to develop new communication and logistic systems. The traditional Imperial methods of maintaining contact between distant military units relied on astropathic communication and regular supply convoys, both of which were vulnerable to interdiction by loyal forces. The traitor legions developed alternative approaches that incorporated warp-based communication methods and supply networks that operated independently of Imperial infrastructure. The Sons of Horus established forward operating bases on worlds that had declared for the Warmaster, creating a network of staging areas that could support extended military operations. These facilities were designed to be self-sufficient, incorporating manufacturing capabilities that could produce ammunition, spare parts, and basic equipment without relying on external supply sources. The bases also served as recruitment centers, where local populations could be conscripted into auxiliary forces that supplemented the Space Marine legions. The legions' drive toward Terra required careful coordination with other traitor forces to ensure that loyal defenders could not concentrate their strength against any single axis of advance. The Sons of Horus developed a strategy that emphasized multiple simultaneous offensives, forcing Imperial commanders to divide their attention and resources among numerous threats. This approach required extensive intelligence gathering to identify weak points in Imperial defenses and careful timing to ensure that attacks were launched when they would have maximum strategic impact. The campaign planning for the advance on Terra incorporated lessons learned from the Legion's Great Crusade experiences, but adapted these techniques for the unique challenges of fighting a defensive war against an enemy that possessed detailed knowledge of Imperial military capabilities. The Sons of Horus developed contingency plans for scenarios ranging from direct assault on heavily fortified positions to extended siege warfare against enemies who possessed superior numbers and defensive advantages. The integration of corrupted Imperial Guard units into the traitor war machine provided the Sons of Horus with access to specialized capabilities that Space Marine legions typically lacked. Artillery units, armored formations, and air support assets drawn from Guard regiments that had declared for Horus gave the traitor forces tactical flexibility that purely Astartes armies could not achieve. The coordination between Space Marine and Guard units required new command structures that could accommodate the different operational tempos and tactical doctrines of these diverse forces. The Sons of Horus established training programs designed to prepare their battle brothers for the unique challenges of heretical warfare. These programs emphasized psychological conditioning that would allow warriors to employ demonic allies without succumbing to corruption themselves, tactical instruction in fighting other Space Marines, and strategic education that covered the coordination of multi-legion operations. The training also included indoctrination sessions designed to reinforce loyalty to Horus and hatred of the Imperial system they sought to overthrow. The Legion's fleet assets were modified to support their new role as coordinators of galactic rebellion. Command ships were equipped with enhanced communication systems that could maintain contact with traitor forces across vast distances, while transport vessels were reconfigured to carry the specialized equipment and personnel required for demon summoning and warp manipulation. The fleet's composition was adjusted to emphasize long-range striking power and the ability to support extended operations in hostile territory. The development of new weapons systems specifically designed for use against loyalist forces became a priority for the Sons of Horus technical specialists. These weapons incorporated technologies that had been forbidden during the Great Crusade, including devices that could disrupt the spiritual protections that protected loyal Space Marines from psychic attack. The Legion's artificers also developed specialized equipment for demon binding and control, creating tools that allowed their battle brothers to direct demonic allies with greater precision and safety. The final approach to Terra represented the culmination of 7 years of galactic civil war, with the Sons of Horus leading a massive armada of traitor forces toward the cradle of humanity. The fleet that assembled at the edge of the Sol system was unlike anything that had been seen since the darkest days of Old Night, comprising not only the warships of 8 Space Marine legions, but also countless vessels from corrupted Imperial Navy squadrons, renegade Mechanicum-forged ships, and the twisted hulks that served the Dark Mechanicum. At the center of this vast armada flew the vengeful Spirit, Horus's flagship, its hull scarred by years of warfare and decorated with the trophies of 100 conquered worlds. The Sons of Horus had spent months preparing for the assault on humanity's homeworld, studying intelligence reports gathered by their agents within the Imperial Palace and analyzing the defensive capabilities that the Emperor had constructed around Terra. The planet's orbital defenses had been strengthened considerably since the beginning of the heresy, with massive weapon platforms positioned at key points throughout the system and patrol fleets maintaining constant vigilance against potential attackers. The lunar installations that had once served as recruitment centers for the Sons of Horus, when they were still the Luna Wolves, had been converted into fortress positions, bristling with macro cannons and lance batteries. The breakthrough of Terra's outer defenses required the Sons of Horus to coordinate a complex multi-pronged assault that utilized every asset at their disposal. The Legion's fleet elements engaged the orbital defense platforms, while specialized boarding parties targeted key installations that controlled the planet's protective shield generators. The fighting in the void around Terra was characterized by the kind of brutal close-quarters combat that had become the Sons of Horus's specialty, with Terminator-armored veterans using teleportarium technology to appear directly aboard enemy vessels and eliminate their crews before they could coordinate effective resistance. Abaddon led the spearhead assault against the Eternity Wall spaceport, one of the most heavily fortified positions in the Imperial Palace's outer perimeter. The first captain's tactical planning for this operation demonstrated the evolution of Sons of Horus doctrine since the beginning of the heresy, incorporating demonic allies and corrupted war machines alongside traditional Space Marine assault formations. The Juster and Terminators under his command had been equipped with weapons specifically designed for fighting other Astartes, including combi weapons that fired ammunition capable of penetrating even the heaviest power armor. The assault on the Eternity Wall revealed the extent to which the Sons of Horus had embraced the powers of chaos during their long campaign against the Imperium. Demon engines materialized alongside the advancing Space Marines, their immaterial essence allowing them to phase through defensive barriers that would have stopped conventional vehicles. The Legion's sorcerers worked in concert with these supernatural allies, weaving protective wards that deflected the worst effects of the defenders' weapons, while simultaneously channeling destructive energies that could breach even the reinforced walls of the Imperial Palace. The defenders of the Eternity Wall included elements from multiple loyal Space Marine legions, creating a situation where the galaxy's finest warriors faced each other in direct combat. The Imperial Fists, who formed the backbone of the defensive force, had spent years preparing for this moment, constructing killing fields and overlapping fields of fire that maximized their ability to inflict casualties on attacking forces. However, the Sons of Horus had fought against Imperial Fists before and understood their tactical preferences, allowing them to develop counter-strategies that exploited the defenders' predictable responses to specific threats. The breakthrough at the Eternity Wall came when Sons of Horus assault teams managed to disable the shield generators that protected the port's main landing platforms. The loss of these defensive systems allowed traitor aircraft to begin landing troops directly within the facility's perimeter, bypassing the carefully constructed defensive positions that had been designed to channel attackers into predetermined kill zones. The fighting that followed was characterized by the kind of room-to-room combat that favored the Sons of Horus's aggressive tactics and willingness to accept heavy casualties in exchange for rapid territorial gains. As the outer defenses of the Imperial Palace began to crumble under the sustained assault, Horus made the decision to personally lead the final push toward the Emperor's throne room. The Warmaster's presence on the battlefield had an immediate impact on the morale of both traitor and loyalist forces, with his corrupted battle brothers fighting with renewed ferocity, while the defenders struggled to maintain cohesion in the face of such an overwhelming enemy. The psychic emanations that surrounded Horus had grown stronger throughout the heresy, creating an aura of dread that affected even veteran space marines who had faced the worst horrors the galaxy could produce. The advance through the Imperial Palace's inner chambers required the Sons of Horus to overcome defensive positions that had been prepared by Rogel Dorn himself, utilizing the Imperial Fist's Primarch's unparalleled expertise in fortification design. Each corridor and chamber had been converted into a potential killing ground, with hidden weapon emplacements and booby traps that could eliminate entire squads of attackers. The palace's architecture had been modified to create choke points where small numbers of defenders could hold off much larger attacking forces, forcing the traitors to pay a heavy price for every meter of ground they gained. The Sons of Horus adapted to these challenges by employing the same tactical flexibility that had made them successful during the Great Crusade, but now enhanced by their access to demonic allies and forbidden technologies. Possessed Space Marines could phase through walls and barriers that would have stopped conventional troops, while demon engines provided heavy fire support that could breach even the strongest defensive positions. The Legion's sorcerers proved particularly valuable in these confined spaces, their ability to manipulate reality itself, allowing them to create new passages through solid walls or teleport assault teams directly behind enemy lines. The final confrontation between Horus and the Emperor took place aboard the Vengeful Spirit after the Warmaster had lowered his flagship's void shields in what appeared to be either supreme confidence or a moment of tactical miscalculation. The Emperor's decision to teleport directly onto the traitor flagship, accompanied only by Rogel Dorn and Sanguinius, represented a desperate gamble that the Master of Mankind could end the rebellion by eliminating its primary architect. The teleportation process scattered the three loyalists throughout the massive vessel, forcing each to fight his way toward the bridge where Horus waited. The interior of the Vengeful Spirit had been transformed during the years of the Heresy into something that barely resembled an Imperial warship. The corridors were lined with trophies taken from conquered worlds and the skulls of defeated enemies, while demonic sigils carved into the bulkheads pulsed with unnatural light. The ship's machine spirits had been corrupted or replaced entirely with bound demons, creating an environment where the normal laws of physics operated differently, and where reality itself seemed to shift and change according to the whims of the Chaos Gods. Sanguinius reached the bridge first, his angelic wings allowing him to navigate the ship's twisted passages more quickly than his companions. The confrontation between the Blood Angels Primarch and Horus represented the culmination of a relationship that had spanned centuries, with two brothers who had once fought side by side, now facing each other as mortal enemies. The duel that followed was as much a battle of ideologies as it was a contest of martial skill, with Sanguinius representing the Emperor's vision of humanity's future, while Horus embodied the corruption and ambition that threatened to destroy everything they had built together. The death of Sanguinius at Horus's hands marked the point of no return for the Warmaster, demonstrating that his corruption had progressed beyond any possibility of redemption. The Blood Angel's Primarch's sacrifice was not in vain, however, as his final attack managed to create a crack in the armor that the Chaos Gods had woven around Horus's soul. This spiritual wound would prove crucial when the Emperor finally confronted his fallen son, providing an opening that allowed the Master of Mankind to strike at the essence of what Horus had become rather than merely his physical form. The Emperor's arrival on the bridge of the Vengeful Spirit created a confrontation that transcended purely physical combat, becoming a battle between competing visions of humanity's destiny that was fought on both material and psychic planes simultaneously. The chamber where they fought became a nexus point where the Imperium pressed close to reality, allowing the full power of both combatants to manifest in ways that would have been impossible under normal circumstances. The psychic energies unleashed during their battle were so intense that they could be felt throughout the Sol system, causing even hardened Space Marines to fall to their knees as waves of supernatural force washed over them. The Emperor's reluctance to destroy his son completely, even after witnessing the depths of Horus's corruption, nearly proved fatal when the Warmaster launched a final assault that came close to overwhelming the Master of Mankind's defenses. The intervention of Alanius Pues, a mortal human who threw himself between the two Primarchs, provided the catalyst that finally convinced the Emperor that his son was beyond salvation. The sight of Horus casually obliterating a mere human who had shown such courage stripped away the last vestiges of paternal affection that had stayed the Emperor's hand. The psychic scream that accompanied Horus's destruction echoed throughout the warp, announcing to every demon and chaos god that their chosen champion had been defeated. The Warmaster's death sent shockwaves through the traitor forces besieging Terra, as the psychic bonds that had held the rebellion together suddenly snapped. The sons of Horus aboard the vengeful spirit found themselves leaderless and surrounded by loyalist forces, while their battle brothers fighting throughout the Imperial Palace began receiving contradictory orders as the command structure collapsed. Abaddon's discovery of Horus's body marked the beginning of his own transformation from loyal lieutenant to the architect of the Legion's future. The first captain's reaction to his primarch's death was not grief but rage, directed not at the Emperor who had struck the killing blow, but at Horus himself for what Abaddon perceived as weakness in the final moment. The sight of the Warmaster's corpse, stripped of the divine power that the Chaos Gods had invested in him, convinced Abaddon that relying on the patronage of the Dark Gods was a mistake that he would not repeat when his time came to lead. The immediate aftermath of Horus's death saw the Sons of Horus struggling to maintain cohesion as Imperial forces began converging on their positions throughout the Sol system. The Legion's command structure, which had been built around absolute loyalty to the Warmaster, proved inadequate for the crisis of leadership that followed his elimination. Different captains and company commanders began making independent decisions about whether to continue fighting or attempt to withdraw, creating a chaotic situation where Sons of Horus units were operating at cross purposes with each other. The great scouring that followed the failed siege of Terra transformed the Sons of Horus from the masters of galactic rebellion into desperate fugitives fleeing the wrath of a resurgent Imperium. The Legion's retreat from the Sol system was conducted under constant harassment from loyalist forces, with Imperial Navy squadrons and Space Marine strike forces pursuing the fleeing traitors across multiple star systems. The Sons of Horus found themselves fighting a series of running battles where their primary objective was survival rather than victory, a dramatic reversal from their previous role as the architects of Imperial conquest. The fragmentation of the traitor forces during the retreat created opportunities for the Sons of Horus to demonstrate the tactical flexibility that had made them successful during the Great Crusade. Small groups of battle brothers conducted guerrilla operations against pursuing loyalist forces, using their knowledge of Imperial tactics to set ambushes and conduct hit-and-run attacks that inflicted disproportionate casualties on their enemies. These operations were coordinated through the warrior lodge networks that had survived the chaos following Horus's death, providing a communication system that operated independently of the formal command hierarchy. The decision to retreat into the Eye of Terror was made collectively by the surviving traitor legions, recognizing that the warp storm provided the only sanctuary where they could escape the relentless pursuit of Imperial forces. The Sons of Horus played a crucial role in coordinating this withdrawal, using their experience in fleet operations to organize the movement of thousands of ships and millions of personnel into the chaotic realm where the laws of reality operated according to different principles. The transition from the material universe into the Eye of Terror marked the end of the Horus Heresy and the beginning of a new phase in the Legion's existence, one that would ultimately lead to their transformation into the Black Legion under Abaddon's leadership. Fabius Bile, the chief apothecary whose expertise in gene manipulation had earned him a reputation throughout the traitor legions, emerged from the chaos with a proposal that he claimed would restore the Sons of Horus to their former glory. The apothecary had spent years studying the genetic template of Horus Lupercal, analyzing tissue samples and genetic markers that he had collected during the Warmaster's lifetime. Bile's obsession with perfecting the Space Marine creation process had led him to develop techniques that went far beyond anything sanctioned by Imperial doctrine, incorporating forbidden knowledge gleaned from demon-touched sources and Xeno's biotechnology. The laboratory complex that Bile established on the demon world of Harmony was a testament to his twisted genius, featuring bioforges and gene cultivation chambers that operated according to principles that defied conventional understanding of biology. The facility's organic architecture pulsed with unnatural life, its walls lined with nutrient conduits that fed a network of growth vats where Bile conducted his experiments. The apothecary had recruited a cadre of assistants from among the Legion's surviving medical personnel, battle brothers whose desperation to restore their primarch had overcome their revulsion at the methods required to achieve such a goal. The first clone that emerged from Bile's laboratories bore an uncanny resemblance to Horus in his physical prime, possessing the same imposing stature and aristocratic features that had made the Warmaster such a charismatic leader. The genetic template had been reconstructed from multiple sources, combining cellular material recovered from the vengeful spirit with psychic imprints that Bile claimed could restore not only the Primarch's physical form, but also his memories and personality. The clone's awakening was attended by dozens of sons of Horus officers who had traveled to Harmony specifically to witness what they hoped would be their Legion's salvation. However, the being that opened its eyes in Bile's laboratory was fundamentally different from the Horus Lupercal who had led them to Terra. The clone possessed the Warmaster's memories and tactical knowledge, but lacked the spiritual essence that had made the original Primarch more than merely a superior space marine. The absence of a soul created a hollow echo of greatness, a creature that could recite Horus's speeches and replicate his strategic thinking, but could not inspire the same loyalty that had once bound the Legion together. The clone's attempts to assert authority over the assembled sons of Horus were met with skepticism and barely concealed hostility from veterans who recognized the fundamental wrongness of what Bile had created. Ezekiel Abaddon's reaction to the clone was immediate and violent, the first captain's rage at what he perceived as a desecration of his Primarch's memory, overwhelming any political considerations that might have counseled restraint. Abaddon had spent the months since Terra grappling with his own sense of failure and responsibility for the Legion's defeat, his guilt over surviving when Horus had fallen, driving him to increasingly desperate attempts to prove his worthiness as a leader. The sight of Bile's artificial creation claiming the right to command the sons of Horus triggered a fury that had been building since the moment Abaddon had discovered his Primarch's corpse aboard the vengeful spirit. The confrontation between Abaddon and the clone took place in the central chamber of Bile's laboratory, surrounded by the gene forges and cultivation tanks that had given birth to the artificial Primarch. The clone's combat abilities were formidable, its enhanced physiology matching that of the original Horus in terms of speed, strength, and tactical awareness. However, it lacked the supernatural charisma and psychic presence that had made the true Warmaster such a devastating opponent, fighting with technical precision, but without the inspired fury that had characterized Horus's greatest victories. Abaddon's victory over the clone was achieved through a combination of superior equipment and the kind of ruthless pragmatism that had made him one of the Legion's most effective officers. The first captain's Terminator armor had been modified with trophies and enhancements gathered during the long campaign against the Imperium, including weapons that had been blessed by demon princes and inscribed with sigils that channeled the power of the Chaos Gods. The clone's death sent shockwaves through the assembled sons of Horus, many of whom had pinned their hopes for the Legion's future on the artificial Primarch's leadership. Bile's response to the destruction of his first clone was to accelerate the production of additional specimens, each one incorporating refinements and modifications designed to address the flaws that had been revealed during the initial attempt. The apothecary's laboratories became a production line for artificial Primarchs, with new clones emerging from the gene forges at regular intervals. Each iteration displayed subtle differences from its predecessors, as Bile experimented with different genetic combinations and attempted to imbue his creations with the spiritual essence that the first clone had lacked. The proliferation of Horus clones created a crisis of legitimacy within the Sons of Horus that went far beyond simple questions of leadership succession. Different factions within the Legion began supporting different clones, each group convinced that their chosen specimen represented the true heir to the Warmaster's legacy. The resulting conflicts were fought with the same intensity that had characterized the Legion's battles against the Imperium, but now Sons of Horus were killing Sons of Horus in pursuit of competing visions of their primarch's resurrection. The clone designated as Horus, the Risen gained significant support among the Legion's more traditionalist elements, battle brothers who sought to restore the Sons of Horus to their pre-heresy glory and viewed the artificial primarch as a means of reclaiming their lost honor. This clone had been engineered with enhanced psychic abilities that allowed it to project an aura of authority similar to that possessed by the original Horus, though the effect was achieved through technological augmentation rather than natural charisma. The Risen's supporters established a power base on the demon world of Maleum, where they began recruiting new battle brothers and attempting to rebuild the Legion's traditional command structure. Another clone, known as Horus Reborn, attracted followers from among the Legion's more radical elements, Space Marines who had embraced the mutations and enhancements that came with extended exposure to chaos corruption. This specimen had been modified with demonic genetic material that gave it abilities beyond those of a normal primarch, including the capacity to manifest psychic powers that bordered on sorcery. The Reborn's followers viewed their artificial primarch as an evolution of the original Horus, a being that had transcended the limitations of mere flesh to become something greater than human. The third major clone faction rallied around a specimen that Bile had designated as Horus Ascendant, a creation that incorporated genetic material from multiple primarchs in an attempt to create a being that possessed the best qualities of all the Emperor's sons. The Ascendant displayed tactical brilliance that exceeded even the original Horus's capabilities, but its hybrid nature made it unstable and prone to violent mood swings that reflected the conflicting genetic imperatives built into its DNA. The followers of the Ascendant were primarily drawn from the Legion's tactical specialists and strategists, battle brothers who valued intellectual prowess over raw charisma or supernatural power. Abaddon's opposition to all of the clones was based on more than simple revulsion at Bile's genetic manipulations. The first captain had come to believe that the Sons of Horus's defeat at Terra was the result of their dependence on a single charismatic leader, and that any attempt to recreate that dynamic would inevitably lead to the same catastrophic failure. His vision for the Legion's future involved a more distributed command structure, where authority was based on proven competence rather than genetic inheritance or artificial charisma. The first captain's growing influence within the Legion was built on his track record of successful operations during the retreat from Terra and the early years in the Eye of Terror. Abaddon had led several raids against Imperial installations that had yielded significant quantities of weapons and supplies, demonstrating that the Sons of Horus could still strike effectively against their former masters despite their reduced circumstances. His tactical innovations, which incorporated lessons learned from fighting other Space Marine legions, had proven effective in the small-scale conflicts that characterized warfare within the Eye of Terror. The warrior lodge networks that had survived the Legion's fragmentation provided Abaddon with a means of building support that operated independently of the formal command hierarchy. The lodges had always emphasized personal bonds between battle brothers over rigid adherence to rank structure, and this tradition proved valuable in the chaotic environment that followed Horus's death. Abaddon's participation in lodge meetings allowed him to build relationships with Space Marines from throughout the Legion, creating a network of allies who supported his vision for the future based on personal loyalty rather than institutional authority. The conflict between Abaddon's faction and the various clone supporters escalated into open warfare as different groups within the Sons of Horus began competing for control of key resources and strategic positions within the Eye of Terror. The battles were fought across multiple demon worlds and space hulks, with each faction seeking to eliminate its rivals while simultaneously defending against attacks from other traitor legions and demonic entities. The fighting was characterized by the kind of brutal close-quarters combat that the Sons of Horus had perfected during the Heresy, but now employed against their own battle brothers. The Battle of Maleum marked a turning point in the internal conflict, as Abaddon led a coalition of forces against the stronghold established by the supporters of Horus, the Risen. The assault required careful coordination between multiple factions that had previously been fighting each other, demonstrating Abaddon's growing skill as a political operator as well as a military commander. The first captain's ability to forge temporary alliances with groups that had fundamental disagreements about the Legion's future showed that he possessed the kind of strategic thinking that transcended purely tactical considerations. The siege of Maelium lasted for several months, with the defenders utilizing the demon world's unstable geography to create defensive positions that shifted and changed according to the whims of the warp. The attackers were forced to adapt their tactics constantly as familiar terrain transformed into alien landscapes, requiring the kind of flexibility that had made the Sons of Horus successful during the Great Crusade. Abaddon's forces eventually achieved victory through a combination of superior coordination and willingness to accept heavy casualties in exchange for strategic objectives. The death of Horus the Risen during the final assault on Maelium eliminated one of the major claimants to the Legion's leadership, but the victory came at a cost that demonstrated the futility of the ongoing internal conflicts. Hundreds of Sons of Horus had died fighting other Sons of Horus, reducing the Legion's strength at a time when they could ill afford such losses. The survivors were forced to confront the reality that their internecine warfare was accomplishing nothing except the gradual extinction of their brotherhood. Abaddon's consolidation of power following the Battle of Maelium involved a combination of military success and political maneuvering that demonstrated his evolution from a purely tactical commander to a strategic leader capable of managing complex coalitions. The first captain's approach to eliminating the remaining clone factions involved isolating each group from potential allies while simultaneously offering incentives for individual battle brothers to abandon their artificial primarchs in favor of his leadership. This strategy proved more effective than direct military confrontation, as it avoided the heavy casualties that had characterized earlier phases of the conflict. The final confrontation with Fabius Bile took place in the Apothecary's laboratory complex on Harmony, where the gene manipulator had continued producing clones despite the destruction of his earlier specimens. Bile's latest creations incorporated increasingly exotic genetic modifications, including material derived from xeno species and demonic entities that pushed the boundaries of what could still be considered human. The laboratory had become a charnel house where failed experiments were discarded alongside successful specimens that had been deemed inadequate for various reasons. Abaddon's assault on Bile's facility was conducted with surgical precision, targeting the gene forges and cultivation chambers that enabled the apothecary's work, while avoiding unnecessary destruction of valuable equipment and research materials. The first captain's forces included specialists in technological warfare who understood the complex systems that Bile employed, allowing them to disable key components without triggering the self-destruct mechanisms that the paranoid apothecary had installed throughout his laboratory. The capture of Fabius Bile marked the end of the clone production program, though the apothecary himself proved too valuable to execute despite the chaos his creations had caused. Bile's expertise in gene manipulation and his knowledge of advanced biotechnology made him a strategic asset that Abaddon could not afford to waste, even though the first captain harbored deep personal animosity toward the architect of the Legion's internal strife. The compromise that emerged from this situation involved Bile's continued service to the Legion under strict supervision, with his research activities redirected toward projects that served Abaddon's strategic objectives rather than his own obsessions. The destruction of the final clone facility on Harmony marked the beginning of Abaddon's transformation from first captain of a broken legion to the architect of something far more ambitious and terrible. The consolidation of power that followed required more than military victory over rival factions. It demanded a fundamental reimagining of what the Sons of Horus could become in the twisted realm of the Eye of Terror. Abaddon's vision extended beyond mere survival or revenge against the Imperium. He sought to forge an instrument of conquest that would succeed where Horus himself had failed. The pilgrimage that would define Abaddon's ascension began in the demon world's crystalline caverns beneath Baal's ruined laboratories, where the first captain discovered artifacts that had been hidden since the earliest days of the Legion's exile. Among these relics were star charts that mapped the deepest regions of the Eye of Terror, territories where reality became so malleable that the boundaries between the material universe and the realm of pure chaos dissolved entirely. These maps, inscribed on metal that shifted between different states of matter depending on the observer's perspective, revealed the locations of ancient sites where the four chaos gods maintained their most sacred temples and testing grounds. Abaddon's decision to undertake this journey was not driven by religious devotion or the desire for demonic patronage that had motivated so many other traitor space marines. Instead, the first captain sought to understand the true nature of the powers that had elevated Horus to the position of Warmaster of Chaos, and more importantly, to learn how those same forces had ultimately contributed to his downfall. The pilgrimage was conceived as both a quest for knowledge and a trial by ordeal, a means of proving to himself and to the scattered remnants of his legion that he possessed the strength to succeed where his gene father had failed. The first destination on Abaddon's dark odyssey was the brass citadel of Khorne, a massive fortress cathedral that materialized and vanished according to the blood god's whims across the demon world of Sikaris. The structure defied conventional architectural principles, its walls constructed from the skulls of warriors who had died in glorious combat, while its towers were built from weapons that had tasted the blood of heroes. The citadel's interior spaces were designed as an eternal battlefield where demons and mortals fought endless duels to prove their worthiness in Khorne's sight. The trials that Abaddon faced within the brass citadel tested not only his combat prowess, but also his understanding of the nature of warfare itself. The blood god's challenges required the first captain to demonstrate mastery over different forms of violence, from single combat against demon princes to the coordination of massive battles involving thousands of combatants. Each victory earned Abaddon insights into the tactical principles that governed conflict at both material and spiritual levels, knowledge that would prove essential when he began forging his new legion. The demon prince who served as Khorne's champion in these trials was a being that had once been a space marine captain from one of the traitor legions, his identity lost to millennia of service to the blood god. The creature's form had been reshaped by constant warfare into something that was more weapon than warrior, its limbs replaced with blades and its torso armored with the bones of its defeated enemies. The duel between Abaddon and this champion lasted for days, fought across multiple levels of the citadel as the combatants sought to gain tactical advantages through superior positioning and environmental exploitation. Abaddon's victory over Khorne's champion was achieved not through superior strength or speed, but through his ability to recognize and exploit the demon prince's fundamental weakness, its complete dedication to direct confrontation at the expense of tactical flexibility. The first captain's willingness to employ deception and misdirection, tactics that the blood god's servants considered dishonorable, allowed him to create openings that a more straightforward opponent could never have achieved. The demon prince's destruction earned Abaddon the respect of Khorne's other servants, though the blood god himself remained distant and judgmental. The second stage of the pilgrimage took Abaddon to the Garden of Nurgle, a realm of perpetual decay and renewal located within the bowels of a space hulk that drifted through the eye's central maelstrom. The garden defied the conventional understanding of life and death, featuring landscapes where diseased plants grew from the corpses of plague victims, while streams of contaminated water nourished ecosystems that thrived on corruption. The air itself was thick with spores and toxins that would have killed unprotected humans within minutes, but which created a strange beauty for those capable of appreciating the aesthetics of entropy. Nurgle's trials focused on endurance and acceptance rather than violence, challenging Abaddon to survive in environments where the very atmosphere was hostile to life. The first captain was forced to navigate swamps filled with acidic mud that dissolved his armor's outer layers, cross deserts where the sand was composed of ground bone and ash, and climb mountains whose peaks were shrouded in clouds of virulent disease. Each challenge tested his ability to adapt to changing conditions while maintaining focus on his ultimate objectives. The Great Unclean One who governed this portion of the garden was an ancient entity that claimed to have witnessed the birth of the first plague during humanity's prehistoric era. The demon's form was a grotesque parody of paternal care, its bloated body nurturing countless smaller demons that emerged from open wounds and festering sores. The creature's voice carried the weight of eons, speaking in whispers that conveyed both wisdom and corruption to those who listened carefully to its words. Abaddon's test within Nurgle's domain involved accepting the temporary embrace of the plague god's gifts without allowing them to fundamentally alter his essential nature. The diseases that infected him during his passage through the garden were unlike anything found in the material universe, targeting not only his physical form, but also his memories and personality. The first captain was forced to maintain his sense of identity while experiencing the dissolution of the boundaries between self and environment that characterized Nurgle's influence. The third trial brought Abaddon to the Palace of Pleasures, Slaanesh's domain within a crystalline structure that existed simultaneously in multiple dimensions. The palace's architecture was designed to overwhelm the senses, featuring chambers where colors had texture and sounds possessed physical weight. The building itself was alive in ways that transcended conventional understanding, its walls pulsing with rhythms that matched the heartbeats of its occupants, while its corridors rearranged themselves to create new experiences for those who walked them. Slaanesh's challenges were perhaps the most dangerous that Abaddon faced during his pilgrimage, as they attacked his psychological defenses rather than his physical capabilities. The Prince of Pleasure sought to corrupt the first captain through the promise of experiences that would transcend the limitations of his enhanced physiology, offering sensations and knowledge that no mortal had ever achieved. The temptations were tailored specifically to exploit Abaddon's personal weaknesses and ambitions, presenting visions of power and glory that seemed within reach if he would only surrender his independence to the Dark Prince's will. The Keeper of Secrets who administered these trials was a being of terrible beauty, its form shifting between masculine and feminine characteristics, while maintaining an aura of predatory grace. The demon's voice could induce euphoria or agony depending on its intentions, and its presence created an atmosphere where normal concepts of time and space became fluid and unreliable. The creature's attempts to seduce Abaddon involved not only physical pleasures, but also intellectual and spiritual temptations that promised to unlock the secrets of the universe. Abaddon's resistance to Slaanesh's influence was based on his fundamental understanding that true power required self-control rather than self-indulgence. The first captain's experiences during the Horus Heresy had taught him that those who surrendered themselves completely to the chaos gods became tools rather than masters, and he was determined to avoid that fate regardless of the rewards being offered. His rejection of the Dark Prince's gifts was not based on moral considerations, but on practical recognition that accepting such power would ultimately limit his freedom of action. The final stage of the pilgrimage led Abaddon to the impossible fortress of Tzeentch, a structure that existed in a state of constant transformation within the heart of the Eye's most chaotic regions. The fortress was built from crystallized possibility, its walls composed of potential futures that had never come to pass, while its towers reached into dimensions that had no names. The building's interior was a maze of corridors that led to different points in time and space, requiring visitors to navigate not only physical obstacles, but also temporal paradoxes and dimensional anomalies. Tzeentch's trials were intellectual rather than physical, challenging Abaddon to solve puzzles that required understanding of concepts that existed beyond normal human comprehension. The Changer of Ways presented the first captain with scenarios that had multiple correct solutions, forcing him to choose between alternatives that would lead to fundamentally different outcomes. Each decision revealed aspects of Abaddon's character and ambitions, while simultaneously testing his ability to think strategically about problems that had no obvious answers. The Lord of Change who supervised these trials was perhaps the most alien of the demon princes that Abaddon encountered during his pilgrimage. The creature's form was composed of pure intellect made manifest, its thoughts visible as geometric patterns that shifted and evolved in response to changing circumstances. The demon's communication was conducted through direct mental contact rather than speech, creating conversations that occurred at the speed of thought and covered topics that span millennia of potential history. The knowledge that Abaddon gained from his interaction with Tzeentch's servant was perhaps the most valuable aspect of his entire pilgrimage, providing him with insights into the long-term consequences of different strategic decisions. The demon showed him visions of possible futures where various approaches to building his new legion would lead to success or failure, allowing him to understand the complex relationships between immediate tactical choices and ultimate strategic objectives. This information would prove crucial when he began the process of transforming the Sons of Horus into something entirely different. The completion of Abaddon's pilgrimage through the domains of the four Chaos gods had fundamentally changed him, though not in the ways that the dark powers had intended. Rather than becoming a devoted servant of any single deity, the first captain had learned to understand and manipulate the forces of chaos while maintaining his independence from their direct control. This knowledge came at a price. The trials had left permanent marks on both his body and soul, scars that would serve as constant reminders of the powers he had faced and overcome. The forging of the Talon of Horus began immediately upon Abaddon's return from his pilgrimage, utilizing knowledge and materials that he had gathered during his journey through the Eye's most dangerous regions. The weapon was conceived not merely as a replacement for his previous wargear, but as a symbol of his transformation from loyal lieutenant to independent warlord. The Talon's construction required the integration of technologies from multiple sources, combining the advanced metallurgy of the Mechanicum with demonic essence and fragments of archaeotech that predated the Age of Strife. The weapon's primary component was a power claw that had been enhanced with energy fields capable of disrupting both physical matter and psychic defenses. The claw's talons were forged from metal that had been blessed by each of the Chaos gods during Abaddon's pilgrimage, creating a weapon that could channel the powers of chaos while remaining under his direct control. The integrated Combi bolter was loaded with ammunition that had been crafted using techniques learned from the demon smiths of Khorne's Citadel, each round capable of penetrating even the heaviest power armor. The acquisition of Drachnian, the demon sword known as the End of Empires, represented the culmination of Abaddon's transformation from mortal space marine to something approaching the power level of a primarch. The weapon had been hidden within the deepest vaults of the Imperial Palace during the Siege of Terra, its presence known only to the Emperor himself and a select few of his most trusted servants. The sword's location had been revealed to Abaddon through visions granted by Tzeentch during his pilgrimage, though the Demon Prince had been careful not to explain the true significance of what he was offering. The infiltration of Terra required careful planning and the coordination of resources that Abaddon had been gathering since his return from the Eye's deepest regions. The strike force that accompanied him was composed of the most skilled and experienced warriors from the former Sons of Horus, space marines who had proven their loyalty to him personally rather than to any abstract ideal or demonic patron. The mission's success depended on their ability to penetrate the Imperial Palace's defenses without triggering the massive response that a larger assault would have provoked. The demon bound within Drachnian was an entity of immense power and malevolent intelligence, a being that had existed since the earliest days of human civilization and had been present at the fall of countless empires throughout galactic history. The sword's awakening in Abaddon's hands created a psychic resonance that was felt throughout the Eye of Terror, announcing to every demon prince and chaos champion that a new power had emerged among the forces of darkness. The weapon's acceptance of Abaddon as its wielder was not automatic. The demon within the blade tested his worthiness through trials that were conducted on a purely spiritual level, examining his memories and motivations to determine whether he possessed the strength of will necessary to master such a potent artifact. The destruction of Horus's corpse was the final act required to complete Abaddon's transformation from first captain to the architect of a new order. The Warmaster's body had been preserved within a stasis field aboard a derelict ship that drifted through the Eye's outer regions, maintained by loyalists who still hoped for their primarch's eventual resurrection. The facility where the corpse was kept had been converted into a shrine where the faithful could pay their respects to the fallen Warmaster, its chambers filled with trophies and relics from the Legion's greatest victories. Abaddon's assault on the shrine was conducted with surgical precision, his forces eliminating the guards and defenders before they could raise an alarm or destroy the facility's contents. The first captain's approach to his Gene father's corpse was conducted alone, without witnesses who might have questioned his actions or attempted to interfere with what he intended to do. The sight of Horus's body, reduced to a desiccated husk by the Emperor's final attack, confirmed Abaddon's belief that his Primarch had been fundamentally weakened by his dependence on the Chaos God's power. The ritual destruction of the corpse involved more than simple physical obliteration. Abaddon sought to sever the spiritual connections that still bound the sons of Horus to their Primarch's legacy. The process required the use of techniques that he had learned during his pilgrimage, methods for manipulating the flow of psychic energy that allowed him to redirect the loyalty and devotion that the Legion's survivors still felt toward Horus. The flames that consumed the Warmaster's remains were fed by energies drawn from the warp itself, creating a conflagration that existed on multiple dimensional levels simultaneously. The founding of the Black Legion was announced through a series of proclamations that were broadcast throughout the Eye of Terror, reaching every demon world and space hulk where the former Sons of Horus had established bases. Abaddon's message was clear and uncompromising. The old Legion was dead, destroyed by its dependence on a single leader, and its subservience to powers that viewed mortal warriors as expendable tools. The new organization that would take its place would be built on different principles, emphasizing merit over birthright and practical results over ideological purity. The transformation of the Sons of Horus into the Black Legion marked the beginning of a new phase in the Long War, one characterized by calculated strategic patience rather than the desperate fury that had driven the original heresy. Abaddon's approach to weakening the Imperium differed fundamentally from his Gene father's direct assault on Terra, recognizing that the Emperor's realm had grown too vast and too well defended to be conquered through a single overwhelming campaign. Instead, the Despoiler developed a strategy of systematic attrition, launching successive Black Crusades that would gradually erode Imperial strength while simultaneously gathering the resources and allies necessary for an eventual final victory. The concept of the Black Crusades emerged from Abaddon's analysis of the Imperium's fundamental vulnerabilities, insights gained through millennia of observation and careful intelligence gathering. The Emperor's realm was held together by a complex network of trade routes, communication lines, and defensive installations that required constant maintenance and protection. The Imperium's sheer size meant that its forces were spread thin across thousands of star systems, creating opportunities for concentrated attacks against isolated targets. Most importantly, the rigid doctrinal thinking that characterized Imperial military leadership made their responses predictable, allowing a sufficiently cunning opponent to manipulate them into disadvantageous positions. Each Black Crusade was conceived as both a military campaign and a test of the Legion's evolving capabilities, with specific objectives that served Abaddon's long-term strategic goals while providing immediate tactical benefits. The Despoiler understood that his forces needed to grow stronger with each campaign, accumulating weapons, ships, and experienced warriors that would be essential for the eventual assault on Terra. The Crusades also served as recruitment drives, attracting new followers from among the Imperium's enemies and demonstrating the Black Legion's power to potential allies throughout the galaxy. The first Black Crusade, launched in the 31st millennium, represented Abaddon's initial attempt to translate his strategic vision into military reality. The target was the fortress world of Kasser-Halm, a heavily fortified planet that controlled one of the major shipping lanes connecting the Segmentum Solar to the galaxy's outer regions. The world's defenses had been designed by the same engineers who had fortified Terra itself, featuring overlapping fields of fire, underground bunker networks, and orbital defense platforms that could engage multiple targets simultaneously. Abaddon's approach to the siege demonstrated the tactical innovations that would characterize all subsequent Black Crusades. Rather than attempting a direct assault against the fortress world's strongest defenses, the Black Legion conducted a series of feints and diversionary attacks that forced the defenders to spread their forces across multiple potential landing sites. The real assault came from an unexpected direction, utilizing a network of ancient tunnels that predated the fortress construction and had been discovered through careful reconnaissance conducted by Chaos cultists who had infiltrated the world's civilian population. The underground assault required specialized equipment and training that the Black Legion had developed specifically for this type of warfare. Terminator armored veterans equipped with melta weapons and power fists led the advance through the tunnel networks, their heavy armor protecting them from cave-ins and structural collapses, while their weapons cleared obstacles and eliminated defensive positions. The confined spaces favored the Black Legion's aggressive close-quarters combat doctrine, allowing them to neutralize the defenders' numerical advantage through superior individual skill and equipment. The breakthrough into Kasser Haln's central command complex came after weeks of underground fighting, with Black Legion forces emerging directly beneath the fortress world's primary command bunker. The surprise attack eliminated the planetary governor and his senior staff before they could coordinate an effective response, creating a command vacuum that paralyzed the defenders' ability to respond to subsequent assaults. The capture of the fortress world's communication systems allowed Abaddon to intercept and redirect Imperial reinforcements, turning the defenders' own assets against them. The success of the First Black Crusade provided the Black Legion with significant strategic benefits beyond the immediate territorial gains. The captured fortress world became a forward operating base that could support future operations against Imperial targets, while the weapons and equipment seized during the campaign significantly enhanced the Legion's combat capabilities. More importantly, the victory demonstrated to potential allies throughout the Eye of Terror that the Black Legion possessed the tactical skill and strategic vision necessary to achieve meaningful victories against the Imperium. The interval between the First and Second Black Crusades was used to consolidate these gains while simultaneously preparing for more ambitious operations. Abaddon established recruitment centers on worlds that had been brought under Black Legion control, drawing new warriors from local populations that had been indoctrinated in the Legion's ideology. The Despoiler also began forging alliances with other Chaos warbands and renegade factions, creating a network of subordinate forces that could be called upon to support future campaigns. The Second Black Crusade targeted the Belize Corona system, a cluster of industrial worlds that served as a major manufacturing center for Imperial Guard equipment and vehicles. The campaign's objectives were primarily economic, seeking to disrupt the Imperium's ability to equip its military forces while simultaneously capturing the industrial infrastructure that could be repurposed to serve the Black Legion's needs. The assault required coordination between multiple Black Legion fleets and the integration of specialized forces capable of capturing and operating complex manufacturing facilities. The opening phase of the Second Black Crusade involved a series of simultaneous attacks against the system's outer defenses, with Black Legion forces engaging Imperial Navy patrols and orbital defense platforms, while transport ships moved toward the primary industrial worlds. The defenders' response was hampered by communication disruptions caused by Chaos sorcerers who had infiltrated the system's astropathic relay stations, creating confusion about the scale and direction of the assault. The Black Legion's ability to coordinate multiple simultaneous operations across vast distances demonstrated the organizational improvements that Abaddon had implemented since the First Crusade. The capture of Forge World Lucius during the Second Black Crusade represented one of the Black Legion's most significant early victories, providing access to advanced manufacturing capabilities that would prove essential for future campaigns. The world's Mechanicum defenders had prepared for siege warfare, converting their manufacturing facilities into fortress positions and programming their servitor workforce to resist any attempt at capture. However, the Black Legion's assault incorporated demon engines and possessed war machines that could interface directly with the Forge world's machine spirits, turning the defenders' own automated systems against them. The battle for Lucius's primary manufactorum complex lasted for months, with Black Legion forces fighting room by room through facilities that had been converted into elaborate death traps. The Mechanicum's defensive preparations included automated weapon systems, toxic gas dispensers, and mechanical guardians that could operate independently of human oversight. The Black Legion's victory was achieved through a combination of superior individual combat skills and the integration of chaos-corrupted technology that could override the defenders' automated systems. The 3rd through 7th Black Crusades followed a pattern of escalating ambition and complexity, with each campaign targeting increasingly important Imperial assets while testing new tactical approaches and organizational innovations. The Third Crusade focused on the destruction of Space Marine recruitment worlds, seeking to disrupt the Imperium's ability to replace losses among its elite forces. The Fourth Crusade targeted major trade routes, conducting a series of coordinated raids that disrupted commerce across multiple sectors. The Fifth Crusade was directed against Imperial Navy bases, capturing ships and facilities that could be repurposed for the Black Legion's own fleet operations. The Sixth Black Crusade represented a significant escalation in scope and ambition, targeting the Agrippina system and its associated Forge worlds. The campaign required the coordination of multiple traitor legions and renegade factions, demonstrating Abaddon's growing influence within the broader Chaos community. The assault incorporated lessons learned from previous crusades, utilizing improved intelligence gathering, enhanced coordination between different types of forces, and more sophisticated approaches to siege warfare. The Seventh Black Crusade marked the first time that Abaddon personally led a major assault against a heavily defended Imperial position, demonstrating the combat capabilities that he had developed since his transformation into the Despoiler. The target was the Fortress Monastery of the Imperial Fist successor chapter, known as the Crimson Fists, a stronghold that had been constructed using the same defensive principles that had made the Imperial Palace so difficult to assault. The campaign served as both a test of the Black Legion's ability to overcome the Imperium's most formidable defenses and a personal challenge for Abaddon to prove his worthiness as a military commander. The 8th through 11th Black Crusades continued the pattern of systematic pressure against Imperial defenses, with each campaign building upon the successes and lessons of its predecessors. The 8th Crusade targeted the Coronid Deeps, a region of space that contained several important Imperial Navy bases and shipyards. The 9th Crusade focused on the destruction of astropathic relay stations, seeking to disrupt Imperial communications across a broad front. The 10th Crusade was directed against the Sabbat worlds, a cluster of systems that served as a major recruitment center for Imperial Guard regiments. The 11th Black Crusade represented a significant departure from the pattern established by earlier campaigns, focusing on the acquisition of archaeotech artifacts rather than territorial conquest or resource capture. The target was the ancient vault world of Mordian Prime, where pre-Age of Strife technology had been stored by the Mechanicum for study and eventual integration into Imperial systems. The campaign required specialized forces capable of operating in the hazardous environment created by unstable archaeotech devices, as well as technical specialists who could identify and extract the most valuable artifacts. The Gothic War, later designated as the 12th Black Crusade, marked the most ambitious and successful of Abaddon's campaigns prior to his final assault on Cadia. The operation's primary objective was the capture of the Blackstone fortresses, ancient archaeotech constructs that possessed firepower capable of destroying entire star systems. The fortresses had been discovered drifting in the Gothic sector, their origins and purpose unknown to Imperial authorities, who had classified them as potential threats, requiring constant monitoring and defensive preparation. The campaign began with a series of diversionary attacks against Imperial positions throughout the Gothic sector, forcing the defenders to spread their forces across multiple threatened locations. The Black Legion's intelligence network had identified the patrol schedules and defensive arrangements surrounding each Blackstone fortress, allowing Abaddon to plan simultaneous assault operations that would prevent the Imperial forces from concentrating their strength against any single target. The coordination required for these operations demonstrated the organizational sophistication that the Black Legion had achieved after millennia of warfare. The capture of the first Blackstone fortress required the Black Legion to overcome defenses that had been designed by the Adeptus Mechanicus specifically to prevent such an eventuality. The fortress was surrounded by a defensive fleet that included several Space Marine battle barges and a significant number of Imperial Navy vessels, while the structure itself was protected by void shields and weapon systems that could engage multiple targets simultaneously. The Black Legion's assault incorporated demon engines and possessed war machines that could operate in the vacuum of space, providing fire support for boarding parties that teleported directly onto the fortress's outer hull. The interior of the Blackstone fortress presented unique challenges that required the Black Legion to adapt their standard boarding procedures. The structure's corridors and chambers were designed according to architectural principles that seemed to defy conventional understanding of space and geometry, with passages that led to different destinations depending on the direction of travel and rooms that were larger on the inside than their external dimensions suggested. The fortress's automated defense systems included weapons that fired energy beams capable of disintegrating matter at the molecular level, as well as gravitational fields that could crush intruders or trap them in temporal loops. The Black Legion's victory was achieved through a combination of superior individual combat skills and the integration of chaos sorcery that could manipulate the fortress's reality warping effects. The Legion's sorcerers had studied similar archaeotech devices during previous campaigns, developing techniques for interfacing with machine spirits that had been corrupted by millennia of exposure to warp energy. The capture of the fortress's central control chamber required the elimination of its automated guardians, ancient constructs that combined advanced technology with artificial intelligence that had achieved near sentience. The second and third Blackstone fortresses were captured through variations of the same basic approach, though each operation required modifications to account for the specific defensive arrangements and environmental hazards present at each location. The Black Legion's growing experience with archaeotech systems allowed them to develop more efficient methods for overcoming the fortress's defenses, while the capture of each successive fortress provided additional firepower that could be used to support subsequent operations. The fourth Blackstone fortress was destroyed during the attempt to capture it, the result of a desperate Imperial counterattack that triggered the structure's self-destruct systems rather than allow it to fall into chaos hands. The explosion created a massive warp rift that consumed several nearby star systems, demonstrating the incredible destructive potential of the archaeotech constructs, while simultaneously depriving the Black Legion of one of their primary objectives. The loss served as a sobering reminder of the risks involved in attempting to capture and control technology that had been created by civilizations whose understanding of the universe's fundamental principles exceeded even the Emperor's knowledge. The fifth and sixth Blackstone fortresses were secured through operations that incorporated lessons learned from the previous failures, with specialized teams tasked with disabling the self-destruct systems before attempting to capture the central control chambers. The Black Legion's technical specialists had developed techniques for interfacing with the fortress's machine spirits without triggering their defensive protocols, allowing them to gain control of the structure's primary systems while minimizing the risk of catastrophic failure. The successful capture of multiple Blackstone fortresses provided the Black Legion with strategic weapons that fundamentally altered the balance of power in their conflict with the Imperium. The fortress's firepower was sufficient to destroy entire Imperial fleets or reduce planetary surfaces to molten slag, while their advanced propulsion systems allowed them to appear anywhere in the galaxy with minimal warning. The psychological impact of these weapons was as significant as their military value, forcing Imperial commanders to reconsider their defensive strategies and deployment patterns. The Gothic War's conclusion saw the Black Legion in control of 3 intact Blackstone fortresses, along with significant quantities of other archaeotech devices and weapon systems. The campaign had also resulted in the destruction or capture of numerous Imperial vessels and installations, while demonstrating the Black Legion's ability to conduct complex multi-system operations against heavily defended targets. The victory provided Abaddon with both the resources and the reputation necessary to begin planning his most ambitious campaign yet, the assault on the Cadian Gate that would become the 13th Black Crusade. The gradual weakening of the Cadian Gate began long before the 13th Black Crusade's official launch, the result of sustained pressure applied through decades of smaller operations and infiltration efforts. The Cadian system's strategic importance as the primary route between the Eye of Terror and the rest of the galaxy made it the most heavily fortified position in Imperial space, with multiple fortress worlds, orbital defense platforms, and permanent fleet assignments that could respond to threats from multiple directions simultaneously. The Black Legion's approach to undermining Cadian defenses involved a combination of direct military pressure and subtle subversion that exploited the system's dependence on external supply lines and communication networks. Raids against supply convoys and communication relays gradually degraded the defenders' ability to maintain their equipment and coordinate their responses to threats, while infiltration operations placed Chaos cultists in positions where they could provide intelligence about defensive preparations and potentially sabotage critical systems at crucial moments. The fortress world of Cadia itself had been transformed into the most formidable defensive position in the galaxy, its surface covered with overlapping fields of fire and underground bunker networks that could shelter millions of defenders. The planet's orbital defenses included massive weapon platforms that could engage capital ships at extreme range, while its ground-based installations featured artillery systems capable of providing fire support across entire continents. The Cadian shock troops who garrisoned the world were among the Imperium's most experienced and well-equipped soldiers, veterans of countless campaigns who had been specifically trained for the defense of their homeworld. The transformation from the Sons of Horus into the Black Legion required a complete restructuring of recruitment practices that broke from 10 millennia of space marine tradition. Where loyalist chapters maintained strict genetic requirements based on their primarch's gene seed, Abaddon established a meritocratic system that welcomed warriors from any source capable of proving their worth in battle. The Black Legion's recruitment centers, scattered across demon worlds and hidden bases throughout the Eye of Terror, processed aspirants from every original traitor legion, renegade chapters that had turned from the Emperor's light, and even corrupted Imperial Guard units whose officers had demonstrated exceptional tactical acumen. The integration process began with trials that tested not only physical capability, but also psychological resilience and strategic thinking. Potential recruits faced combat scenarios designed to evaluate their ability to adapt to the Black Legion's fluid tactical doctrine, while psychic screening identified those whose minds could resist demonic possession while still channeling the powers of chaos when necessary. The most promising candidates underwent gene seed implantation using stocks gathered from multiple sources, creating space marines whose enhanced physiology combined elements from different primarch lineages. Former World Eaters brought their expertise in close-quarters combat and berserker fury, though the Black Legion's discipline protocols prevented the complete loss of tactical control that had plagued Angron's sons during the Heresy. Death Guard veterans contributed knowledge of chemical warfare and siege tactics, their experience with toxic environments proving valuable during operations on worlds where conventional life support systems would fail. Iron Warriors provided engineering expertise and siege warfare specialization, while Word-Bearers brought theological knowledge and experience in coordinating with demonic allies. The most significant recruitment source came from Space Marine chapters that had fallen to chaos corruption after millennia of loyal service to the Imperium. These renegade chapters often possessed advanced equipment and tactical knowledge that had been developed since the heresy, providing the Black Legion with insights into Imperial military doctrine and defensive strategies. The integration of these forces required careful management to prevent factional conflicts between warriors who had served different masters, but successful assimilation created units that combined the best aspects of multiple military traditions. Abaddon's command structure reflected his understanding that the rigid hierarchies of traditional Space Marine organizations were inadequate for the complex multi-legion operations that the Black Legion conducted. The Ezekarian, his inner circle of chosen champions, served as both tactical advisors and field commanders capable of independent action when circumstances required rapid decision-making without direct oversight. Each member of this elite group commanded respect based on proven battlefield performance rather than inherited rank or genetic heritage. Kayan the Sorcerer brought expertise in warp manipulation and demon binding that proved essential for the Black Legion's integration of supernatural allies. His knowledge of pre-heresy psychic disciplines, combined with forbidden techniques learned during millennia in the Eye of Terror, allowed him to coordinate the activities of demonic entities without succumbing to the madness that claimed many who attempted such practices. The sorcerer's abilities extended beyond simple combat applications, encompassing strategic divination that could predict enemy movements and identify weaknesses in Imperial defensive positions. Telemachin Lyras, formerly of the Emperor's Children, commanded the Black Legion's rapid assault formations with a tactical brilliance that had been refined through centuries of lightning warfare. His units specialized in the kind of surgical strikes that could eliminate key targets before defenders could mount effective resistance, utilizing advanced mobility equipment and specialized weapons designed for precision rather than raw destructive power. The integration of sonic weapons and other exotic armaments from his original legion provided the Black Legion with capabilities that few Imperial forces were prepared to counter. Liorvain Ukris brought the tactical flexibility of the World Eaters combined with a level of strategic thinking that had been rare among Angron's sons. His command of the Black Legion's assault companies emphasized controlled aggression rather than mindless fury, creating units that could maintain tactical coherence even during the most intense combat situations. The Berserker implants that enhanced his warriors' combat effectiveness were modified to prevent the complete loss of higher brain functions that had plagued the original World Eaters. Falcus Kibber, the Widowmaker, commanded the Black Legion's Terminator companies with an expertise in siege warfare that rivaled the Imperial Fist's legendary defensive capabilities. His tactical innovations included the development of specialized breaching techniques that could overcome even the most sophisticated defensive positions, while his leadership of boarding actions against enemy vessels had resulted in the capture of numerous Imperial ships that were subsequently incorporated into the Black Legion's fleet assets. The integration of diverse Space Marine elements required the development of new training protocols that could accommodate warriors with fundamentally different combat doctrines and cultural backgrounds. The Black Legion established training facilities on multiple demon worlds, each one specialized for different aspects of warfare and equipped with captured Imperial equipment that allowed recruits to familiarize themselves with enemy capabilities. These facilities also served as testing grounds where new tactical approaches could be developed and refined before implementation in actual combat operations. The incorporation of mortal auxiliary forces represented another significant departure from traditional Space Marine organizational principles. The Black Legion maintained extensive networks of chaos cultists, renegade Imperial Guard units, and corrupted planetary defense forces that provided capabilities that even enhanced Space Marines could not match. These auxiliary forces served multiple functions, from intelligence gathering and logistics support to specialized roles that required large numbers of personnel or specific technical expertise. Cultist cells embedded within Imperial worlds provided early warning of defensive preparations and troop movements, while also serving as recruitment sources for individuals whose skills or knowledge made them valuable additions to the Black Legion's operations. The most successful cultist organizations were those that maintained the appearance of loyalty while gradually subverting Imperial institutions from within, creating networks that could remain dormant for decades before being activated to support Black Crusade operations. Renegade Guard regiments brought heavy weapons, armored vehicles, and artillery systems that complemented the Black Legion's Space Marine forces during large-scale operations. The integration of these units required careful coordination to ensure that their different operational tempos and tactical doctrines did not create vulnerabilities that enemy forces could exploit. The most successful integrations occurred when Guard units were assigned specific roles that utilized their strengths while minimizing their exposure to threats that they were not equipped to handle. The demon allies that fought alongside the Black Legion represented perhaps the most complex aspect of their organizational structure, requiring specialized knowledge and equipment to coordinate effectively. The binding rituals that secured demonic cooperation were conducted by sorcerers who had spent centuries learning to negotiate with entities whose motivations and thought processes were fundamentally alien to mortal understanding. These alliances were typically temporary and task-specific, with demons providing capabilities that no mortal force could match in exchange for opportunities to manifest in the material universe. Lesser demons served as scouts and infiltrators, their immaterial nature allowing them to gather intelligence that conventional reconnaissance methods could not obtain. Their ability to phase between dimensions made them ideal for bypassing defensive positions and conducting sabotage operations against targets that were considered impregnable by conventional forces. The coordination of these entities required constant vigilance to prevent them from pursuing their own agendas at the expense of the Black Legion's objectives. Greater demons provided strategic capabilities that could alter the outcome of entire campaigns, their supernatural powers allowing them to manipulate reality itself in ways that conventional weapons could not counter. The summoning and binding of such entities required extensive preparation and significant resources, including the sacrifice of captured enemies and the construction of ritual sites that could channel sufficient warp energy to maintain the demon's manifestation. The risks involved in such operations were considerable, as failure could result in the demon turning against its supposed allies or escaping to pursue its own destructive impulses. The Black Legion's fleet organization reflected the diverse origins of its component elements, incorporating vessels from multiple sources that had been modified to operate as a coherent naval force. The core of the fleet consisted of ships that had belonged to the original Sons of Horus, including the massive battleship Vengeful Spirit, which served as Abaddon's flagship and mobile command center. These vessels had been extensively modified during millennia in the Eye of Terror, their hulls scarred by countless battles, while their internal systems had been upgraded with both advanced Imperial technology and forbidden archaeotech devices. Captured Imperial vessels formed a significant portion of the Black Legion's naval assets, ranging from escort destroyers to massive battleships that had been taken during successful boarding actions or surrendered by crews that had been corrupted by chaos influence. The integration of these ships required extensive modifications to remove Imperial identification systems and loyalty protocols, while installing equipment that allowed them to operate alongside demon engines and other supernatural elements of the Black Legion's war machine. The Planet Killer, a massive vessel whose origins predated the Age of Strife, represented the ultimate expression of the Black Legion's naval power. The ship's primary weapon could destroy entire worlds through the manipulation of gravitational forces, while its secondary armaments were capable of engaging multiple capital ships simultaneously. The vessel's machine spirit had been corrupted by millennia of exposure to chaos energy, creating an artificial intelligence that was both malevolent and unpredictable in its responses to tactical situations. Space hulks that had been captured and converted into mobile bases provided the Black Legion with forward operating capabilities that could support extended campaigns in hostile territory. These massive conglomerations of fused starships and debris were equipped with manufacturing facilities, training areas, and docking bays that could accommodate entire fleets. The largest of these installations served as recruitment centers where new warriors could be processed and indoctrinated before being assigned to active units. The logistics network that supported Black Legion operations extended throughout the Eye of Terror and into the material universe, utilizing a combination of conventional supply lines and supernatural methods of resource acquisition. Demon worlds under Black Legion control provided raw materials and manufacturing capabilities, while raiding operations against Imperial supply convoys yielded weapons, ammunition, and equipment that could be redistributed to frontline units. The Black Legion's approach to equipment procurement emphasized adaptability and technological diversity rather than standardization, recognizing that different tactical situations required different tools and weapons. Units were equipped with whatever armaments were most appropriate for their assigned missions, ranging from ancient archaeotech devices, whose capabilities were not fully understood, to recently captured Imperial equipment that provided insights into current enemy capabilities. The integration of chaos corrupted technology created weapons and equipment that possessed capabilities beyond those of their Imperial equivalents, though often at the cost of reliability and predictable operation. Demon weapons that housed malevolent entities could channel supernatural energies that could penetrate even the strongest defensive systems, while possessed vehicles and war machines could operate with an intelligence and adaptability that purely mechanical systems could not match. The Black Legion's communication systems incorporated both conventional astropathic methods and supernatural techniques that utilized demonic intermediaries to relay messages across vast distances. The corruption of astropaths through controlled exposure to chaos influence created psychers who could maintain contact with forces operating deep within Imperial territory, while demon-possessed communication equipment could function in environments where conventional systems would fail due to warp interference. The coordination of multi-system operations required sophisticated planning and intelligence capabilities that drew upon resources scattered throughout the galaxy. The Black Legion maintained networks of agents and informants within Imperial institutions, providing early warning of defensive preparations and troop movements while identifying potential targets for future operations. The most valuable intelligence sources were those positioned within the Imperial military hierarchy, where access to strategic planning documents and operational orders could provide insights into enemy intentions and capabilities. The Black Legion's organizational structure continued to evolve throughout the millennia following its founding, adapting to changing circumstances and incorporating lessons learned from both successful operations and tactical failures. The flexibility that Abaddon had built into the organization's fundamental principles allowed it to absorb new elements and capabilities while maintaining the coherence necessary for large-scale military operations. This adaptability would prove essential as the Black Legion prepared for its most ambitious undertaking yet, the 13th Black Crusade that would finally breach the Cadian Gate and open the path to Terra itself. The preparations for the 13th Black Crusade began decades before the first Chaos vessels crossed into Imperial space, with Abaddon orchestrating the most comprehensive military buildup in the history of the Long War. The Despoiler's strategic vision extended far beyond the simple conquest of Cadia, encompassing a systematic campaign that would shatter the Imperium's ability to coordinate its defenses across multiple sectors simultaneously. Intelligence networks that had been cultivated over millennia provided detailed assessments of Imperial defensive capabilities, while diplomatic missions to demon primarchs and chaos warbands secured commitments for forces that would dwarf any previous Black Crusade. The assembly of the 13th Black Crusade's forces required the coordination of resources scattered across the Eye of Terror and beyond, with supply convoys traveling through warp routes that had been mapped and secured over centuries of careful exploration. The Black Legion's demon worlds produced weapons and ammunition on an industrial scale, their corrupted manufactorums working continuously to equip the millions of warriors who would participate in the coming campaign. Forge complexes on Sikaris and Galmec operated beyond their theoretical capacity, their machine spirits driven to near madness by the constant demands for increased production. The Blackstone fortresses captured during the Gothic War served as the campaign's primary strategic assets, their immense firepower providing the Black Legion with the ability to engage Imperial fortress worlds on equal terms. The fortresses had been extensively modified since their capture, their weapon systems enhanced with Chaos technology, while their hulls were reinforced with armor plating forged from metals that existed only within the Eye of Terror. Demon engines integrated into their superstructures provided additional offensive capabilities, while possessed machine spirits granted them tactical awareness that exceeded their original programming. Abaddon's alliance with the demon primarch Magnus, the Red brought the Thousand Suns and their sorceress capabilities into the campaign, providing psychic support that would prove essential for breaching Cadia's supernatural defenses. The Crimson King's motivations for joining the 13th Black Crusade were complex, involving both his desire for revenge against the Space Wolves and his recognition that the campaign's success would advance his own long-term objectives within the great game of chaos. The integration of Thousand Suns sorcerers into Black Legion operations required careful coordination to prevent conflicts between different magical traditions and competing loyalties. The participation of Mortarion and his Death Guard added biological warfare capabilities that complemented the Black Legion's conventional military assets. The Plague Marines' expertise in siege warfare and their immunity to most forms of environmental hazard made them ideal for operations on worlds where conventional forces would struggle to maintain effectiveness. The Death Guard's plague ships carried viral weapons that could devastate entire planetary populations, while their demon engines spread corruption that would persist long after the military campaign had concluded. Angron's World Eaters provided the raw fury and close-quarters combat expertise that would be essential during the final assault phases of the campaign. The Demon Primarch's presence on the battlefield created an aura of bloodlust that affected both friend and foe, driving his followers to heights of violence that exceeded even their normal berserker fury. The coordination of World Eaters' forces required careful tactical planning to channel their aggression toward productive objectives rather than allowing it to dissipate in purposeless slaughter. The 13th Black Crusade's opening moves targeted multiple systems simultaneously, forcing Imperial commanders to divide their attention and resources among numerous threatened locations. The initial assaults focused on disrupting communication networks and supply lines rather than attempting immediate territorial conquest, recognizing that the Imperium's ability to coordinate its response would be crucial to the campaign's ultimate success or failure. Chaos forces struck at astropathic relay stations, naval supply depots, and recruitment centers across a front that spanned dozens of star systems. The assault on the Sikaris sector began with coordinated strikes against the orbital defense platforms protecting the sector capital of Sikaris Prime. Black Legion forces utilized captured Imperial identification codes to approach the platforms without triggering immediate defensive responses, allowing boarding parties to teleport directly onto the installations before their crews could raise shields or activate weapon systems. The capture of the sector's primary communication hub provided the Black Legion with access to Imperial tactical frequencies and deployment schedules, intelligence that would prove invaluable during subsequent operations. The Siege of Mordax Prime demonstrated the Black Legion's evolved approach to fortress warfare, incorporating lessons learned from millennia of siege operations against heavily defended Imperial positions. The planet's surface was covered with interlocking defensive positions that had been designed to channel attackers into predetermined killing zones, while underground bunker networks provided fallback positions that could continue resistance even after the surface defenses had been breached. The Black Legion's assault incorporated demon engines that could phase through solid matter, bypassing the defenders' carefully prepared positions to strike at command centers and ammunition storage facilities. The breakthrough at Mordax came when Black Legion sorcerers managed to corrupt the planet's machine spirits, turning the automated defense systems against their Imperial operators. The fortress world's own weapons began targeting friendly positions, while blast doors sealed defenders into isolated compartments where they could be eliminated piecemeal. The psychological impact of this betrayal by their own equipment was as devastating as the physical damage, creating panic among the garrison that allowed Black Legion forces to exploit gaps in the defensive perimeter. The advance toward Cadia itself required the neutralization of multiple fortress worlds that formed concentric defensive rings around the sector capital. Each world presented unique challenges that tested different aspects of the Black Legion's tactical capabilities, from the void warfare expertise required to overcome orbital defenses to the specialized equipment needed for operations in toxic or radioactive environments. The campaign's success depended on maintaining momentum while ensuring that bypassed Imperial forces could not threaten the Black Legion's supply lines or communication networks. The fortress world of Kasser Kryn occupied a strategic position that controlled one of the primary space lanes leading to Cadia, its massive orbital docks capable of servicing entire Imperial fleets, while its surface installations housed millions of Imperial Guard troops and their supporting equipment. The world's defenses had been strengthened continuously since the end of the Horus Heresy, with each generation of Imperial engineers adding new layers of fortification that created overlapping fields of fire and multiple fallback positions. The planet's garrison included veteran regiments from across the Imperium, units that had been specifically assigned to Cadian defense duties based on their proven combat effectiveness. The Black Legion's assault on Kasser Kryn began with a massive orbital bombardment that utilized the combined firepower of multiple Blackstone fortresses, their planet-killing weapons targeting the world's primary shield generators and communication centers. The bombardment created massive craters that penetrated deep into the planet's crust, while the electromagnetic pulse affects disabled electronic systems across entire continents. The initial barrage was followed by drop pod assaults that placed Black Legion forces directly behind the defenders' primary defensive lines, creating chaos and confusion that prevented effective coordination of the Imperial response. The battle for Kasser Kryn's primary spaceport required the Black Legion to overcome defensive positions that had been carved directly into the bedrock, their reinforced walls capable of withstanding direct hits from orbital bombardment weapons. The Imperial defenders had prepared for siege warfare by stockpiling ammunition and supplies in underground storage facilities, while automated weapon systems provided continuous fire support even when human operators were eliminated. The Black Legion's advance was measured in meters rather than kilometers, with each defensive position requiring specialized assault techniques and heavy casualties to overcome. Castellan Ursarkar Creed's defense of Kasser Kryn demonstrated the tactical brilliance that had made him one of the Imperium's most respected military commanders. His ability to coordinate complex defensive operations, allowing the garrison to inflict far heavier casualties than their numbers would normally suggest. Creed's tactical doctrine emphasized flexibility and rapid redeployment, with reserve forces moving constantly between threatened positions to reinforce weak points before they could be exploited by attacking forces. The Castellan's personal leadership inspired the defenders to continue fighting even when their positions seemed hopeless, creating pockets of resistance that persisted long after conventional military logic suggested they should have surrendered. The final assault on Kasser Kryn's command center required the Black Legion to fight through kilometers of underground tunnels and bunker complexes, their advance contested at every junction and corridor by defenders who had intimate knowledge of the facility's layout. The Imperial forces had prepared the underground complex for extended siege warfare, with stockpiled supplies and independent life support systems that could sustain the garrison for months without external support. The confined spaces favored the defenders' knowledge of the terrain over the attackers' superior individual combat capabilities, creating a grinding war of attrition that tested both sides' determination and resources. Creed's final stand took place in the Fortress World's primary command bunker, where the Castellan continued coordinating defensive operations even as Black Legion forces breached the facility's outer perimeters. The command center's walls were lined with tactical displays showing the status of Imperial forces across the entire Cadian system, their flickering lights gradually shifting from green to red as defensive positions fell one by one. The Castellan staff continued their duties with professional dedication even as the sounds of combat grew closer, maintaining communication with scattered Imperial units and coordinating artillery strikes against Black Legion positions. The capture of Kasser Kryn provided the Black Legion with a forward base that could support the final assault on Cadia itself, while the destruction of the Fortress World's garrison eliminated one of the most experienced and well-equipped defensive forces in the Cadian system. The victory also demonstrated the effectiveness of the Black Legion's evolved tactical doctrine, which combined overwhelming firepower with surgical precision strikes that could exploit weaknesses in even the most sophisticated defensive positions. The lessons learned during the siege would prove valuable during the subsequent assault on Cadia's primary defensive installations. The approach to Cadia required the Black Legion to overcome the most sophisticated defensive network in Imperial space, with orbital platforms, asteroid fortresses, and mobile defense fleets creating multiple layers of protection around the Fortress World. The planet's surface was covered with massive fortifications that had been under continuous construction for 10 millennia, their walls rising hundreds of meters above the surrounding terrain while their foundations extended deep into the planet's crust. The Cadian shock troops who garrisoned these positions were among the finest soldiers in the Imperial Guard, veterans of countless campaigns who had been trained from birth for the defense of their homeworld. The orbital assault began with coordinated strikes against Cadia's outer defense platforms, massive installations that mounted weapons capable of engaging capital ships at extreme range. The Black Legion's fleet included vessels from multiple traitor legions and renegade factions, their combined firepower allowing them to engage the Imperial defenders on multiple fronts simultaneously. The space battle that followed lasted for days, with both sides committing their most powerful vessels in a struggle for orbital supremacy that would determine the outcome of the entire campaign. The breakthrough came when the Will of Eternity, the largest of the captured Blackstone fortresses, managed to penetrate Cadia's inner defensive perimeter through a combination of overwhelming firepower and tactical maneuvering that exploited gaps in the Imperial formation. The fortress's weapons carved through the defending fleet like a blade through parchment, its reality warping capabilities allowing it to ignore conventional defensive measures, while its massive bulk provided protection against the concentrated fire of multiple Imperial vessels. The fortress's advance toward Cadia's surface created panic among the planetary defenders, who recognized that no ground-based weapons could stop such a massive installation. Abaddon's decision to ram the Will of Eternity directly into Cadia's surface was born from tactical necessity rather than desperation, recognizing that the Fortress World's defenses were too strong to overcome through conventional assault methods. The Blackstone Fortress's impact created a massive crater that penetrated deep into the planet's crust, while the explosion of its archaeotech power systems triggered seismic events that destabilized the entire world. The psychic shockwave generated by the fortress's destruction rippled through the warp, creating disturbances that could be felt across multiple star systems. The destruction of Cadia triggered the opening of the Great Rift, a massive warp storm that split the galaxy in half and fundamentally altered the strategic balance between the Imperium and the forces of chaos. The Rift's creation was the result of accumulated warp disturbances that had been building for millennia, with Cadia's destruction providing the final catalyst that allowed the Imperium to break through into real space on an unprecedented scale. The storm's effects were felt immediately across thousands of star systems, with demon incursions and reality distortions creating chaos throughout the Imperium's northern territories. The era Indomitus that followed Cadia's fall marked a new phase in the Long War, with the forces of chaos gaining access to Imperial territory that had been protected for 10 millennia by the Cadian Gate's strategic position. The Great Rift provided multiple stable warp routes that allowed chaos forces to bypass traditional Imperial defensive positions, while the storm's psychic emanations weakened the barriers between reality and the warp throughout the affected regions. The Black Legion's victory had achieved objectives that went far beyond the simple conquest of a single world, fundamentally altering the strategic situation in ways that would influence the course of galactic warfare for millennia to come. The Black Legion's arsenal represents a deliberate rejection of the standardized equipment doctrines that define Loyalist Space Marine chapters, instead embracing a philosophy of tactical adaptation that incorporates weapons and wargear from every conceivable source. This approach stems from Abaddon's recognition that the rigid adherence to prescribed equipment patterns had contributed to the Sons of Horus's defeat at Terra, where Imperial forces could predict and counter their tactical responses based on established doctrine. The Despoiler's vision for his new legion emphasized flexibility and unpredictability, creating a force that could adapt its equipment loadout to match the specific requirements of any given mission or enemy. The corruption of traditional Space Marine wargear begins with the most basic weapons in the Black Legion's arsenal. Bolters that once bore the sacred Aquila and Purity seals of the Imperium have been stripped of their Imperial iconography and refashioned with brass fittings that channel the power of Khorne, their barrels inscribed with blasphemous runes that enhance their destructive potential. The ammunition employed by these weapons incorporates fragments of warp-touched metal that can disrupt the protective blessings woven into Loyalist power armor, while specialized bolt rounds contain acids distilled from the bile of Nurgle's plague bearers, ensuring that even superficial wounds become infected with supernatural diseases. Power armor worn by Black Legion warriors shows the accumulated modifications of millennia spent in the Eye of Terror, their ceramite plates scarred by countless battles, while their internal systems have been enhanced with forbidden technologies that no Loyalist tech marine would dare employ. Helmet optics incorporate demon sight lenses that allow the wearer to perceive enemies hiding behind psychic illusions or camouflage fields, while Vox grills have been modified with acoustic dampeners that can muffle the sounds of movement during stealth operations. The power packs that energize these suits draw energy from miniaturized warp reactors that provide significantly more output than their Imperial equivalents, though at the cost of occasional reality distortions that can cause temporal displacement or gravitational anomalies. The most distinctive aspect of Black Legion wargear is the integration of trophy elements that serve both practical and psychological functions. Skulls taken from defeated enemies are incorporated into shoulder pauldrons and chest plates, their hollow sockets fitted with micro-cogitators that can store tactical data or serve as backup communication systems. Fragments of armor plating salvaged from destroyed Loyalist vehicles are welded onto existing protection as additional layers, creating a patchwork appearance that tells the story of each warrior's personal campaign history. These modifications are not merely decorative. The psychic resonance of victory embedded within each trophy provides subtle enhancement to the wearer's combat effectiveness. Terminator armor employed by the Black Legion's elite formations represents the pinnacle of corrupted Imperial technology, with each suit representing centuries of accumulated modifications and enhancements. The massive cataphracti and Tartaros patterns favored by the Legion have been extensively rebuilt with components salvaged from multiple sources, their power systems upgraded with archaeotech reactors that provide energy output approaching that of vehicle-mounted generators. The servo skulls that accompany these warriors have been replaced with mechanical familiars that house lesser demon spirits, providing tactical awareness and target acquisition capabilities that exceed purely technological systems. The Justaran Terminators, who serve as Abaddon's personal guard, wear armor that has been individually crafted by the Dark Mechanicum's most skilled artificers, each suit incorporating unique modifications that reflect the wearer's combat specialization and personal preferences. Some feature additional weapon mounts that allow the integration of heavy weapons normally reserved for vehicle use, while others incorporate teleportation dampeners that prevent enemy forces from using similar technology to bypass their defensive positions. The most heavily modified suits include reality anchors that stabilize local space-time, preventing enemy psychers from using warp-based attacks to circumvent their physical protection. Chainswords and other close combat weapons used by the Black Legion have been enhanced with cutting edges forged from metals that exist only within the Eye of Terror, their molecular structure maintained through constant exposure to warp energy that would destabilize conventional materials. The chain mechanisms that drive these weapons incorporate demon-possessed machine spirits that can anticipate enemy movements and adjust cutting angles accordingly, while the fuel systems that power their motors utilize refined promethium mixed with essence drawn from the blood of slaughtered enemies. The psychological impact of these weapons is as significant as their physical effectiveness, their howling motors creating an auditory signature that can demoralize enemy forces before combat even begins. Power weapons employed by Black Legion champions and officers channel energies that combine conventional disruptor fields with warp-based enhancement that allows them to cut through materials that would normally resist such attacks. Power swords wielded by company captains feature blade matrices that can shift between different energy frequencies depending on the target being engaged, while power axes used by assault specialists incorporate gravitational field generators that increase the weapon's effective mass at the moment of impact. The most sophisticated power weapons include predictive targeting systems that can calculate optimal strike angles based on analysis of enemy movement patterns and defensive postures. The demon weapons that form the ultimate expression of the Black Legion's arsenal represent a fusion of advanced technology with supernatural entities that transcend the normal limitations of material existence. These weapons are not merely tools, but partnerships between mortal wielders and immaterial beings, whose motivations and capabilities extend far beyond simple destruction. The creation of such weapons requires extensive negotiation with demonic entities, establishing terms of cooperation that satisfy both parties while maintaining the wielder's ultimate control over the weapon's operation. Abaddon's personal arsenal exemplifies the pinnacle of corrupted Imperial wargear, with each piece representing a unique artifact whose creation required resources and expertise available to few others within the Eye of Terror. The Talon of Horus combines a power claw enhanced with reality-disrupting energy fields with an integrated combi bolter that fires ammunition crafted from the essence of defeated enemies. The weapon's machine spirit has been replaced with a bound demon that provides tactical analysis and target prioritization, while its power systems draw energy from a miniaturized warp reactor that can overload to create devastating area effect attacks. Drachnian, the demon sword known as the End of Empires, represents perhaps the most potent individual weapon in the Black Legion's possession, its blade housing an entity of such malevolent power that its mere presence can cause reality distortions in the surrounding area. The sword's edge exists partially outside normal space-time, allowing it to cut through materials and energy fields that would normally be impervious to physical attack. The demon bound within the weapon whispers tactical advice and enemy weaknesses to its wielder, while its supernatural awareness can detect threats that conventional sensors would miss. The Black Legion's heavy weapons incorporate modifications that enhance their destructive potential far beyond Imperial specifications, with plasma cannons that utilize containment fields enhanced by warp energy to achieve higher temperatures and more stable plasma streams. Las cannons employed by the Legion feature focusing crystals grown in the crystalline caverns of demon worlds, their molecular structure allowing them to channel energy frequencies that can penetrate even the most sophisticated void shields. Missile launchers fire warheads that contain payloads ranging from conventional explosives to reality warping devices that can create localized warp rifts upon detonation. Vehicle-mounted weapon systems used by the Black Legion reflect the same philosophy of enhancement and modification that characterizes their personal equipment, with main battle tanks mounting guns that fire shells containing fragments of warp-touched metal capable of disrupting enemy armor at the molecular level. The targeting systems employed by these vehicles incorporate demon sight optics that can track enemies through multiple dimensions simultaneously, while their ammunition storage systems utilize spatial compression techniques that allow them to carry far more ordnance than their physical dimensions would suggest. The Dark Mechanicum forged ships that serve the Black Legion represent a complete departure from the orthodox technological practices of Mars, their workshops and manufactorums operating according to principles that combine advanced engineering with demonic enhancement. These vessels serve as mobile production facilities that can manufacture weapons and equipment while accompanying Black Legion fleets on extended campaigns. Their automated systems capable of producing everything from basic ammunition to sophisticated archaeotech devices. The forged ship's machine spirits have been corrupted or replaced entirely with demon entities that possess technical knowledge spanning millennia of technological development. The Hellforge installations aboard these vessels utilize production techniques that would be considered heretical by orthodox mechanicum doctrine, incorporating living metal that can reshape itself according to programmed parameters and power sources that draw energy directly from the warp. The artificial intelligences that control these systems possess creativity and innovation capabilities that exceed those of conventional machine spirits, allowing them to develop new weapon designs and tactical solutions in response to changing battlefield requirements. The price of this enhanced capability is the constant risk of demon possession or reality distortion that can corrupt entire production runs or cause catastrophic system failures. Weapon maintenance within the Black Legion follows practices that combine traditional mechanicum rituals with demonic pacts that ensure equipment reliability despite the harsh conditions of extended campaigning. Tech Marines who serve the Legion have learned to negotiate with the machine spirits that inhabit their weapons, offering sacrifices of enemy equipment or captured technology in exchange for continued service. The most skilled of these technicians can perform battlefield repairs that would normally require full workshop facilities, their enhanced understanding of machine psychology allowing them to coax damaged systems back to functionality through combinations of technical expertise and supernatural influence. The integration of Xeno's technology into Black Legion equipment represents another aspect of their willingness to embrace any advantage that can enhance their combat effectiveness, regardless of its origin or the doctrinal prohibitions that would prevent loyalist forces from employing such devices. Eldar weapons captured during raids on craftworlds provide insights into energy manipulation techniques that can be adapted for human use, while Orc technology offers examples of robust engineering that can function reliably despite minimal maintenance. The most valuable Xenos artifacts are those that incorporate principles of operation that human science has not yet discovered, providing capabilities that no Imperial equivalent can match. Demon engines that serve alongside Black Legion forces represent the ultimate fusion of technology and supernatural power, their mechanical components enhanced with demonic essence that grants them intelligence and capabilities far exceeding those of conventional vehicles. These war machines can adapt their tactics in real time based on battlefield conditions, while their demonic components provide them with supernatural awareness that allows them to detect enemies hiding behind cover or camouflage. The most sophisticated demon engines can phase between dimensions to bypass obstacles or appear behind enemy lines without warning. The Defiler pattern demon engines favored by the Black Legion combine the mobility of a walker with the firepower of a main battle tank, their spider-like legs allowing them to traverse terrain that would be impassable for wheeled or tracked vehicles. The battle cannon mounted on each Defiler fires shells that contain demon essence capable of possessing enemy vehicles or equipment, turning the defender's own assets against them. The close combat weapons integrated into these engines can tear through enemy armor with supernatural strength, while their demonic intelligence allows them to coordinate attacks with other units, in ways that purely mechanical systems could never achieve. Helldrake fighters that provide air support for Black Legion ground forces represent the corruption of Imperial aircraft design principles, their organic components allowing them to heal battle damage and adapt their configuration for different mission requirements. These demon engines can operate in environments that would destroy conventional aircraft, their supernatural physiology allowing them to function in the vacuum of space or within toxic atmospheres that would corrode normal mechanical systems. The weapons mounted on these creatures fire projectiles that are part ammunition and part living organism, capable of seeking out targets and adapting their attack patterns based on enemy defensive measures. The summoning and binding of demon allies requires specialized equipment and expertise that few within the Black Legion possess, with sorcerers who have spent centuries learning the complex rituals necessary to negotiate with entities whose motivations and thought processes are fundamentally alien to mortal understanding. The summoning circles used for these rituals are inscribed with symbols that exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, their geometric patterns creating focal points where the barriers between reality and the warp become thin enough to allow demonic manifestation. Lesser demons that serve as scouts and infiltrators provide the Black Legion with intelligence gathering capabilities that no conventional reconnaissance force can match, their immaterial nature allowing them to observe enemy positions without being detected by normal sensors or surveillance systems. These entities can phase through solid matter to access secured facilities, while their supernatural senses allow them to detect psychic emanations and emotional states that reveal enemy intentions and morale levels. The coordination of these demon allies requires constant vigilance to ensure that they pursue the Black Legion's objectives rather than their own chaotic impulses. Greater demons that participate in major Black Legion operations bring strategic capabilities that can alter the outcome of entire campaigns, their reality warping powers allowing them to manipulate the battlefield environment in ways that conventional weapons cannot counter. The summoning of such entities requires extensive preparation and significant resources, including the construction of ritual sites that can channel sufficient warp energy to maintain the demon's manifestation for extended periods. The risks involved in such operations are considerable, as failure can result in the demon escaping control or turning against its supposed allies. The binding contracts that secure demon cooperation are negotiated according to principles that combine legal precedent with supernatural tradition, creating agreements that satisfy both mortal tactical requirements and demonic desires for chaos and destruction. The most successful pacts are those that align the demon's natural inclinations with the Black Legion's military objectives, creating situations where both parties benefit from cooperation rather than requiring constant coercion to maintain loyalty. These agreements typically include specific terms regarding the duration of service, the types of targets that can be engaged, and the rewards that will be provided in exchange for the demon's assistance. The Great Rift's creation fundamentally altered the strategic landscape that the Black Legion had operated within for 10 millennia, transforming their position from besieged exiles to the vanguard of a new age of galactic warfare. The massive warp storm that now bisected the galaxy provided stable passage routes between the Eye of Terror and previously inaccessible Imperial territories, while the psychic disturbances radiating from the rift weakened the barriers between reality and the Imperium across vast regions of space. Abaddon recognized that these changed conditions required corresponding adaptations to the Black Legion's operational doctrine, organizational structure, and strategic objectives. The immediate aftermath of Cadia's destruction saw Black Legion forces scattered across multiple star systems, as the Great Rift's opening created unprecedented opportunities for rapid expansion into Imperial territory. Warband commanders who had spent centuries confined to demon worlds suddenly found themselves with access to forge worlds, hive cities, and recruitment centers that had been beyond their reach since the heresy's end. The challenge facing Abaddon was coordinating these dispersed forces while simultaneously exploiting the tactical advantages that the new warp routes provided, all while adapting to Imperial responses that incorporated technologies and strategies developed during the Black Legion's long exile. The emergence of Primaris Space Marines represented the most significant tactical challenge that the Black Legion had faced since their transformation from the Sons of Horus. These enhanced Astartes possessed physical capabilities that exceeded those of traditional Space Marines, their improved gene seed-creating warriors who were faster, stronger, and more resilient than their predecessors. The call pattern power armor worn by Primaris Marines incorporated defensive systems that could resist many of the corrupted weapons that the Black Legion had developed over millennia of warfare, while their bolt rifles fired ammunition with greater penetrating power and range than conventional bolters. Abaddon's initial encounters with Primaris forces during the expansion from the Great Rift revealed that these new Imperial warriors required different tactical approaches than those developed for fighting traditional Space Marines. The enhanced reflexes and improved coordination of Primaris squads made them more effective at countering the rapid assault tactics that had been the Black Legion's signature since the Great Crusade, while their superior equipment allowed them to engage at ranges where the Black Legion's close-quarters combat advantages were negated. The psychological warfare techniques that had proven effective against Imperial Guard units and even veteran Astartes seemed to have reduced impact on Primaris Marines, whose conditioning appeared to provide greater resistance to the fear and despair that demon weapons typically induced. The return of Robute Guilliman created strategic complications that extended far beyond the immediate military threat posed by the Ultramarines Primarch. Guilliman's resurrection brought a level of tactical coordination and strategic thinking to Imperial forces that had been absent since the Emperor's internment upon the Golden Throne, with the returned Primarch implementing reforms that addressed many of the systemic weaknesses that the Black Legion had exploited during previous campaigns. The Indomitus Crusade that followed Guilliman's awakening demonstrated the Imperium's renewed capacity for large-scale offensive operations, with multiple Space Marine chapters and Imperial Guard regiments coordinating their actions across vast distances with an efficiency that rivaled the Great Crusade itself. Guilliman's strategic doctrine emphasized rapid response to chaos incursions, with mobile strike forces positioned to intercept Black Legion operations before they could achieve their objectives and withdraw to the safety of the warp. The Primarch's understanding of Space Marine tactics, gained through 10 millennia of warfare during the Great Crusade and Horus Heresy, allowed him to anticipate many of the approaches that Abaddon's forces employed, creating defensive arrangements that channeled attacking forces into predetermined kill zones. The integration of Primaris reinforcements into existing Imperial formations provided these defensive positions with the firepower and resilience necessary to withstand sustained assault by veteran Chaos Space Marines. The Black Legion's adaptation to these new challenges required fundamental changes to operational procedures that had remained essentially unchanged since the Legion's founding. Traditional assault tactics that relied on overwhelming initial strikes followed by rapid withdrawal were modified to account for the improved response times of Imperial forces, with greater emphasis placed on sustained operations that could achieve strategic objectives despite prolonged resistance. The integration of additional demon allies and corrupted war machines provided the firepower necessary to overcome Primaris defenses, while new recruitment protocols brought fresh warriors into the Legion to replace the increased casualties that these more intensive operations produced. Kion the Sorcerer's role within the Black Legion expanded significantly during the era Indomitus, his expertise in warp manipulation proving essential for navigating the unstable psychic conditions created by the Great Rift's presence. The massive warp storm generated reality distortions that could strand entire fleets in temporal loops or deposit them in star systems that existed only intermittently, requiring specialized knowledge to traverse safely. Kion's development of new navigation techniques that incorporated demon sight and warp scrying allowed Black Legion forces to utilize routes through the rift that Imperial forces could not follow, providing tactical advantages that offset some of the disadvantages created by improved Imperial coordination. The sorcerer's experiments with reality manipulation yielded weapons and tactics that proved particularly effective against Primaris Marines, whose enhanced physiology provided no protection against attacks that targeted their spiritual essence rather than their physical forms. Psychic techniques that could disrupt the neural pathways connecting Primaris warriors to their power armor systems created vulnerabilities that conventional weapons could exploit, while warp-based illusions that affected perception at the genetic level could cause enhanced Space Marines to attack their own allies. These supernatural tactics required careful coordination with conventional forces to prevent friendly fire incidents, but their effectiveness against previously invulnerable targets made the additional complexity worthwhile. Telemachin Lyra's adapted his rapid assault formations to counter the improved coordination of Imperial forces by developing new infiltration techniques that could place Black Legion units behind enemy lines before defensive positions could be established. The former Emperor's Children captain's expertise in sonic warfare proved particularly valuable against Primaris formations, whose enhanced hearing made them more susceptible to acoustic weapons that could disrupt their tactical coordination. The integration of demon engines that could phase between dimensions allowed Lyra's forces to appear within Imperial defensive perimeters without triggering the sensor networks that detected conventional teleportation or drop pod assaults. Liorvain Ukris found that the controlled aggression tactics he had developed for the Black Legion's assault companies required modification when facing Primaris opponents, whose enhanced reflexes could counter the berserker charges that had proven effective against traditional Imperial forces. The former World Eater's solution involved the integration of psychoactive combat drugs that enhanced his warriors' speed and reaction times to levels that matched or exceeded those of Primaris Marines, while specialized training programs taught controlled fury techniques that maintained tactical awareness even during the most intense combat situations. These modifications preserved the psychological impact of World Eater assault tactics while providing the precision necessary to overcome technologically superior opponents. Falkus Kibber's Terminator companies faced particular challenges when engaging Primaris forces, whose improved weapons could penetrate armor that had previously been impervious to conventional Imperial firepower. The Widowmaker's response involved the development of new Terminator armor variants that incorporated additional layers of protection and enhanced mobility systems, creating suits that could withstand the increased firepower of Imperial forces while maintaining the maneuverability necessary for boarding actions and siege warfare. The integration of reality anchors and warp dampeners into these armor systems provided protection against the psychic attacks that Imperial forces increasingly employed to counter heavily armored opponents. The Black Legion's current organizational structure reflects the lessons learned during the early phases of the era Indomitus, with greater emphasis placed on flexibility and rapid adaptation to changing tactical conditions. The traditional company structure has been supplemented with specialized task forces that combine elements from multiple units, creating formations optimized for specific mission types rather than general-purpose operations. These task forces include deep strike specialists trained for operations behind enemy lines, siege warfare experts equipped for extended operations against fortified positions, and rapid response units capable of intercepting Imperial reinforcements before they can reach threatened locations. The integration of new recruitment sources has expanded significantly during the era Indomitus, with the Great Rift providing access to Imperial worlds where potential recruits can be identified and extracted before loyal forces can intervene. The most valuable additions to the Black Legion's ranks come from Primaris Marines who have been corrupted through exposure to chaos influence, their enhanced capabilities making them formidable opponents when turned against their former brothers. The corruption process requires careful management to prevent the kind of genetic instability that plagued early attempts to integrate captured loyalist forces, but successful conversions provide the Black Legion with warriors who understand Imperial tactical doctrine from personal experience. The Ezekarian has been expanded to include new champions whose expertise addresses the specific challenges of warfare in the era Indomitus, with particular emphasis on individuals who possess knowledge of Imperial technological developments and tactical innovations. These new members bring experience with Primaris combat techniques, Imperial Navy coordination protocols, and the advanced equipment that has been deployed to counter Chaos forces during the Indomitus Crusade. Their integration into the Black Legion's command structure provides Abaddon with advisors who can anticipate Imperial responses and develop counter-strategies based on detailed understanding of enemy capabilities. The demon allies that serve alongside the Black Legion have adapted to the changed conditions of the era Indomitus by developing new manifestation techniques that can function despite the reality anchors and psychic dampeners that Imperial forces increasingly employ. Lesser demons have learned to maintain coherent forms in environments where the barriers between reality and the warp are artificially strengthened, while greater demons have developed the ability to project their influence through multiple dimensions simultaneously, creating effects that cannot be countered by conventional anti-demon weapons. These adaptations have come at the cost of increased instability and reduced manifestation duration, requiring more careful timing and coordination when employing supernatural allies. The Black Legion's fleet assets have been significantly enhanced through the capture of Imperial vessels during operations enabled by the Great Rift's opening, with particular emphasis on acquiring ships that incorporate the latest Imperial technological developments. The integration of captured Primaris-class vessels provides the Legion with access to advanced targeting systems, improved void shields, and enhanced weapon systems that can engage Imperial forces on equal terms. The corruption of these vessels' machine spirits has proven more challenging than previous capture operations, as Imperial engineers have developed new protective protocols specifically designed to prevent chaos infiltration of critical systems. The Planet Killer remains the Black Legion's most potent naval asset, its reality warping weapons providing capabilities that no Imperial vessel can match despite the technological advances of the era Indomitus. The massive ship's ability to destroy entire worlds continues to serve as both a strategic weapon and a psychological tool, forcing Imperial commanders to consider the consequences of prolonged resistance when facing Black Legion forces. Recent modifications to the vessel's systems have enhanced its ability to operate within the unstable conditions created by the Great Rift, while new demon-possessed components provide improved targeting accuracy and faster recharge times for its primary weapons. The Black Legion's manufacturing capabilities have expanded significantly through the establishment of new forge complexes on worlds captured during the initial expansion from the Great Rift, with particular emphasis on facilities that can produce equipment capable of matching Imperial technological advances. These installations incorporate captured Imperial manufacturing equipment with dark mechanicum expertise, creating production lines that can manufacture weapons and armor incorporating the best aspects of both technological traditions. The most advanced facilities can produce demon weapons and corrupted equipment that exceed the capabilities of their Imperial equivalents, though the production rates remain lower than those achieved by orthodox Imperial manufactorums. Current intelligence networks maintained by the Black Legion span both sides of the Great Rift, providing early warning of Imperial military movements while identifying potential targets for future operations. The expansion of these networks has been facilitated by the chaos created by the Rift's opening, which has disrupted Imperial communication systems and created opportunities for chaos agents to infiltrate previously secure installations. The most valuable intelligence sources are those positioned within the command structures of Space Marine chapters and Imperial Guard regiments, where access to operational planning documents can provide insights into Imperial strategic thinking and defensive preparations. The Black Legion's approach to the ongoing conflict in the era Indomitus emphasizes patience and strategic thinking over the desperate fury that characterized their earlier campaigns, recognizing that the changed conditions require corresponding adaptations to achieve ultimate victory. Abaddon's long-term strategy involves the systematic weakening of Imperial defensive capabilities through sustained pressure across multiple fronts, while simultaneously building the resources and alliances necessary for an eventual second assault on Terra. The Despoiler understands that Guilliman's return has strengthened the Imperium's ability to resist chaos incursions, but he also recognizes that the same factors that enable Imperial coordination also create vulnerabilities that can be exploited by sufficiently cunning opponents. The future threats that the Black Legion poses to the Imperium extend far beyond simple military conquest, encompassing the systematic corruption of imperial institutions and the gradual erosion of the ideological foundations that hold the Emperor's realm together. The Great Rift's presence provides ongoing opportunities for demon incursions and reality distortions that can undermine Imperial authority even in regions where no chaos forces are physically present, while the psychological impact of the galaxy's division creates doubt and despair that chaos agents can exploit to turn Imperial citizens against their own government. The Black Legion's role in the ongoing narrative of the 41st millennium positions them as the primary architects of the Imperium's eventual downfall, their patient strategy of systematic attrition designed to achieve what the Horus Heresy's direct assault could not accomplish. Abaddon's transformation from the failed Warmaster's lieutenant to the architect of a new order represents the evolution of chaos strategy from desperate rebellion to calculated conquest, with the Black Legion serving as both the instrument and the symbol of humanity's ultimate corruption. The Long War continues into its 11th millennium, with the Black Legion stronger and more dangerous than ever before, their ranks swollen with new recruits drawn from across the galaxy, while their capabilities have been enhanced through millennia of warfare and adaptation. The Great Rift's opening has provided them with opportunities that their predecessors could never have imagined, while their enemies face challenges that test the very foundations of the Imperium's ability to maintain order across a divided galaxy. In this new age of darkness, the Black Legion stands ready to complete the work that Horus began, their black and gold heraldry serving as a reminder that some betrayals echo through eternity, and that the sins of the past continue to shape the destiny of humanity's future. The galaxy burns, and in that burning, the Black Legion finds its purpose fulfilled. They are no longer the broken remnants of a failed rebellion, but the harbingers of an age where chaos shall reign supreme, and the Emperor's dream of human unity will finally be revealed as the hollow promise it always was. The war for humanity's soul continues, and the Black Legion remains its most dedicated practitioners, their loyalty pledged not to any single god or primarch, but to the eternal struggle itself.